Good morning, Commissioner. Commissioner Domingo is fine. I can see her.
You can see me?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Fura and Ms. Mvulani, can I please just request this? Because it's 4 minutes to go now. We need to start at 10 o'clock as per the schedule. Can we request all the members, everybody that is going to be speaking, that needs to be seen video once, and then have a montage, and then look at all the videos at once and inform, like I see Deputy Chairperson's one, if she can move to her right already, and then she will be fine. More right, ma'am. Thank you very much. A little bit to your right again, ma'am. No, you are fine as framing, just to move a little bit to your right.
program. And please, let's just do that so that we minimize any disruption and so on. My request is going to be that we, as we start the program this morning, we just consider, just give me a second. Can we then have you, technical team, put on the sound for the national anthem so that we start our proceedings? Thank you very much. Let's proceed. I suggest that we observe a moment of silence, prayer, and meditation. Let us do so having in mind and in our thoughts all of those members of the legislative sector in its entirety who have passed on as a result of COVID and other issues, including in our country, all other people who have also died tragically as a result of this pandemic. And wish all of those who are recuperating and being hospitalized and recovering from home to do so speedily and so on, as we observe this moment of silence. Thank you. Let's proceed. As we begin this process this morning, I should have added that we have unfortunately gotten a message this morning of a tragic accident, literally next to Parliament, on the statue there next to Parliament. Kumbi carrying children had an accident there, and some of them may have passed on. We don't have the full details. And we hope that their families and loved ones will receive our condolences, and those who have been injured will recover urgently and so on. These accidents are really sad. We are aware of other accidents, such as in the Eastern Cape, where over 30 people died. These accidents are really horrible on the roads, and the tragedy, the trauma it visits on families of those who are involved. We hope that this matter will be dealt with efficiently and effectively this morning, so that the families will be satisfied with the attention that authorities will pay to the matter. Thank you very much. Our purpose for coming together today is not only to present the outcome of the review process that roughly started over 2 years ago of the Women's Charter adopted in 1994 or thereabouts, but it began also in the background of firstly having observed and noted the 20th anniversary of the Constitution and its provisions, and whether we have realized them were the source of our concern. Subsequent to that, we also, the Speakers Forum commissioned the high-level panel of experts led by the past President Kgalema Motlanthe to oversee the investigation of roughly 100 pieces of legislation post-94 to determine their impact or otherwise. In other words, what was the obstacle for achieving equality amongst other things, for example? What were the reasons for that and what could be done to remedy that? So those were critical context of the work and concern. But the most important and, in my opinion, crucial aspects was also the growing gender-based violence in society and femicide and its impact on society as a whole. The urgency for reflecting back on our conduct as public representatives, as people in many organizations and in society in general, as well as the legislation that we were supposed to ensure is implemented to effect the outcomes that would impact on the lived experiences of people in general and women in particular. And this concerns Mokhadi, mute please. These concerns were also linked to the reality and the concerns about the interconnection between race, gender, and class in our society. The resolution of those three contradictions that affects our society constituted a historical grievance that required resolution. So as we present the outcomes of the assessment that has been done, which will be explained by the Deputy Chair soon, we hope that we will engage with this matter. In the foreword to this report that we are referring to, we also express our regret that we did not reach out to as many people as we wished. In other words, we were not sufficiently inclusive, but we think that the extent of engagement with the issues, we would have really benefited from the insights of many people, including those who wrote to us and communicated their concerns and their interests and solutions and identification of what needed to be done. So the spirit of dialogue that must prevail today, that is the background. So the attention should be on what we must do to accelerate, as the theme suggests, in essence, the implementation to impact on the lived experiences of women in particular, and consequentially of families and everybody else. It is crucial that this happens urgently. If I may add anything in the not even add, but elaborate the word acceleration in the theme, is agency, which means we have sought to identify the obstacles. Let's not go back there unless to improve the quality of that which has been identified, but to focus on things we can do that will really be catalytic in their impact on achieving the goals in people's lives. Having said that briefly, we are hoping that the chair, in presenting the report briefly, to enable to lay the foundation for dialogue and a conversation, we will be really pleased to get to hear from everyone their perspective and how, in their opinion, we should move with speed to advance the interests of people in our country. Thank you very much. I now invite the, just give me a second here. My agenda slips out of my hands now and then. Deputy Chair.
Chairperson, Deputy Speaker.
Yes, Deputy Chair, are you there?
I am here, and
okay.
According to the program, it should be
the chairperson.
The chairperson is. Okay.
The chairperson is going to lead us today, and then you will present the framework, as I suggested, of the findings and the results. Ndate Amos Mason, Deputy, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. Please lead us.
Chairperson Masondo.
Probably, okay.
Yes, greetings to everybody. Program Director, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Lichisa Tsinodi, Deputy Chairperson of National Council of Provinces, Honorable Sylvia Lucas, Honorable Members of Parliament, representatives of Chapter 9 institutions, representatives of governmental and civil society organizations, ladies and gentlemen. Program Director, the year 2021 is dedicated to the memory of our trailblazer and struggle icon, Charlotte Manya Maxeke. It is a year that South Africa has set aside for the recognition of women of courage and fortitude who relentlessly pursued the achievement of freedom for all. Charlotte Maxeke is said to have been a woman of many firsts. She was the first Black woman to graduate and obtain a BSc degree in Southern Africa in 1901. She was the first woman to participate in the King's Court under King Sabata Dalindyebo of Abatembu. And they started a school together under the royal family. She then established a school in Everton in Gauteng in 1908, known as the Wilberforce Institute. having been inspired by experience at Wilberforce in Ohio. It is said that she was the only woman that attended the first African National Congress conference in 1912, as well as being the first president of Bantu Women's League in 1918, which later became the ANC Women's League. Program Director, in saluting Charlotte Maxeke, we salute all the women who made it their mission to fight for the total emancipation of women. We salute all the women, departed and living, who have struggled in order to establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. We will never be free until all the women in our land are free. We will never be free until all the women have equal opportunities as equal citizens in a democratic society. I therefore welcome the opportunity to address this gathering on the occasion of the launch of the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development, having been asked to speak on the topic, repositioning the Women's Charter for effective equality as a tool for transformation. The Women's Charter, which was adopted in the founding conference of the Federation of South African Women in 1954 in Johannesburg, expressed the philosophy and aims of the newly established organization. The voice of these women was loud and clear as they depicted the conditions under which they lived. I quote, "We women share with our menfolk the cares and anxieties imposed by poverty and its evils. As wives and mothers, it falls upon us to make the small wages stretch a long way. It is we who feel the cries of our children when they are hungry and sick. It is our lot to keep and care for the homes that are too small, broken and dirty to be kept clean. We know the burden of looking after children and land when our husbands are away in the mines, on the farms, and in the towns, earning our daily bread. We know what it is to keep family life going in pondokis and shanties or in overcrowded one-room apartments. We know the bitterness of children taken to lawless ways, of daughters becoming unmarried mothers while still at school, of boys and girls growing up without education, training, or jobs at a living wage, close quote. Indeed, this was striking a blow for women and a clarion call for those in the power that they would not be able to stop an idea whose time has come. However, 67 years on, this voice still rings true for many women in our land who still find themselves having to face similar, if not worse, conditions, including rising gender-based violence. In particular, the women of the 50s set out to fight, amongst other things, for the right to vote and to be elected to all state bodies without restriction or discrimination, for the right to full opportunities for employment with equal pay and possibilities of promotion in all spheres of work, for equal rights with men in relation to property, marriage, and children, and for the removal of all laws and customs that deny women such equal rights, for the development of every child through free compulsory education the protection of mother and child through maternity homes, welfare clinics, crèches, and nursery schools in countryside and towns. For the removal of all laws that restrict free movement, that prevent or hinder the right of free association and activity in democratic organizations, and the right to participate in the work of these organizations, and the permanent peace throughout the world. Program Director, the 1954 Women's Charter was reviewed in 1994 and adopted as the Women's Charter for Effective Equality at the National Convention convened by the Women's National Coalition. Amongst other things, the Charter declared that the principle of equality shall be embodied at all levels in legislation and government policy. Specific legislation shall be introduced to ensure the practical realization of equality. Women and men shall have equal status and capacity in civil and customary law, including, amongst others, full contractual rights, the right to acquire and hold rights in property, the right to inheritance, and the right to secure credit. There shall be provision for paternal rights, including paid maternity leave with job security, adequate provision of childcare facilities, and reasonable working hours to accommodate family responsibilities in the public and private sector. Every woman and girl shall have access to education and training to realize a full potential. In particular, no woman or girl shall be excluded from education and training on the basis of pregnancy, domestic and childcare responsibilities. Women shall participate in designing and implementing development programs to meet their needs. Women shall have the right to participate fully in all levels of political, civic, and community life. Women shall have the right to decide on the nature and frequency of sexual contact within marriage and intimate relationships, and equitable access to the financial resources of the household, and access to information with regard to economic management of the household. There shall be legal protection for all women against sexual and racial harassment, all forms of abuse and assault. Women shall have the right of control over their bodies, which includes the right to make reproductive decisions, and that women shall be adequately represented in all media institutions, including film, print, and electronic media. Program Director, 7 years since we achieved a democratic dispensation. We appreciate the role played by government in responding to the claims or demands made by women in 1954 and in 1994. Government has dismantled all previous identifiable forms of inhibitions to women. Working with partners, it has sought appropriate means of addressing the challenges that women continue to face. Program Director, in the last 27 years, we have made great strides in reforming laws and policies that prohibited women's full participation in social, economic, and political spheres. For example, we crafted a world-class constitution which protects human rights. We established state institutions to support our democracy, known as Chapter 9 institutions. Among them is the Commission for Gender Equality, whose role is to promote respect for gender equality and the protection, development, and attainment of gender equality. We established the Department of Women, now in the presidency, and known as the Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities, to champion the socio-economic empowerment of women and the promotion of gender equality. We have become a signatory to a number of international conventions, declarations, regional charters, and protocols ultimately aimed at achieving gender equality. And we identified women as the most affected by inequality, poverty, and unemployment in the National Development Plan, the NDP, and other planning support instruments with a view to work ceaselessly on solutions to address the challenges that women continue to face. Of course, the work is far from over. Nonetheless, the country's progressive laws have seen more women serving in higher ranking positions in government than ever before. Access to education by young girls and women has improved substantially over time. And the recognition of Customary Marriage Amendment Act passed by Parliament this year and came into force from the 1st of June has extended the bar in regulating the proprietary consequences of customary marriages. Amongst all this, Statistics South Africa says that the female unemployed rate has remained higher than that of their male counterparts. It says that this is indicative of apparent disparities between men and women in different facets of life, which leave women lagging behind in terms of socio-economic opportunities. Unfortunately, gender-based violence is another major social challenge that we continue to face. In March this year, the National Planning Commission cautioned that in addressing the issues that influence women's participation and gender equality and integrating these into processes, it is necessary to know that women and girls are not a single homogeneous group. Professor Vivian Taylor illustrates this by, for example, pointing to how Black African women living in ex-homeland areas are often especially disadvantaged, and how lone mothers bear an extra heavy burden, adding that in the midst of current global COVID-19 pandemic, the impacts on poor women and those most economically deprived are worse. She concludes by asserting that given that women are the majority of South African citizens, their development and human rights cannot be added onto existing plans and programs. Instead, future planning requires a focus on engendering institutional arrangements within and outside of state systems, ensuring gender redistributive policy, legislative, and planning structures. This is an important submission, especially given the fact that our political and socio-economic challenges will not disappear as new solutions give rise to new challenges. Undoubtedly, it was with this in mind that in 2019, the Women's Parliament decided to undertake a nationwide Women's Charter review process. The purpose was to reposition the 1994 Charter to become a tool for real transformation. The outcome would fortify the claims of women so that these could find full and better expression by a caring government and a supportive civil society. Program Director, the lesson we learned from Mayor Charlotte Maxeke is that in confronting the challenges that beset women during her time, she waged the battle in many fronts, in education, faith, politics, and so on. She knew that, as the National Planning Commission suggests, women are not a homogeneous group. Their interests stretch across different fields and continue to evolve. Therefore, while entrenching the historical claims made by women, today's launch of the reviewed Women's Charter for Parliament's consideration is a means to respond to developing challenges in the course of advancing the struggle for gender equality. It is the duty of both men and women to jealously protest protect our hard-earned freedom, especially the rights that have accrued to women since 1994. Elsewhere in the world, Afghanistan being the prime example, women who have in the last decade become judges, ministers, and police officers are now seeing a new threat to these rights, which we, in our case, have entrenched as self-evident truths. It is thus exceedingly important that we should not only protect and uphold the original names of women, but that we continue to calibrate them so that they can stand the test of time, so that our future generations of women and girls can continue to derive the dividends from the struggle of the likes of Charlotte Maxeke, Albertina Sisulu, Sophie de Bruyn, Lillian Ngoyi, Helen Joseph, and Rahina Musa. Program Director, allow me to conclude by emphasizing that the struggle for gender equality is everybody's struggle. For we are not free until all women in our land are free. Thank you very much.
Don't leave the chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Shall we now move next to the Deputy Chairperson, Dear Lucas, to present to us in brief the key highlights of the findings. Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Let me also begin to acknowledge the following protocols. The Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, our Speaker of the National Assembly, Deputy Speaker, our Program Director, Speakers and Premiers of Provinces, House Chairpersons, members of the Executive, members of Parliament, leadership of SALGA, leadership of Chapter 9 institutions, and particularly also the United Nations programs that have been part and parcel of the process with us. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by greeting all of you. Good morning. The eradication of patriarchy needs all forces of society, more so because it coexists and survives under the most progressive political systems, because it is articulated in many diverse, subtle and hidden or open and crude forms, because it is explained away in many logical sounding ways, ranging from the natural, biological to religious and cultural arguments, because one of its strongest bases is the family, the home, and among loved ones. It is the most complex and entrenched system, embedded in and permeating through all spheres of life. It needs all forms of struggle, persuasion, contestation, compromise, pressure, and confrontation. And I close quote. The gathering of today is actually a symbolic gathering that want to remind us that the struggle of South African women is one in which there is interdependent relationships between the antagonism thrown up by national oppression and the fundamental problem of social justice, economic deprivation, and patriarchy. The women's struggle in South Africa is a process characterized by different phases with different emphases. The 1954 and the 1994 Women's Charters, which both represent critical turning points in our history, where women constructed a body of social, economic, civic, and political rights-based manuscripts to advance gender equality. The Women's Charter for Accelerated Development, which we will be launching today, represents the third strata of gender equality manuscripts developed by South African women, where once again the women emboldened to develop a life document which speaks to the peculiar challenges that women are confronted with in the current epoch of our democratic dispensation. South African women are putting theory into practice, and the words once expressed by Frantz Fanon aptly speaks to this when he said, and I quote, "If you want a different world, you have to change the one you have, close quote. And that is why on August 28th and 2019, the women of South Africa made a demand resolution at the inaugural Women's Parliament of the Sixth Dispensation that a process to review the entire women's rights regime must be undertaken in order to assess progress made in implementing the provisions of the 1994 Women's Charter for effective equality. The review process was undertaken in collaboration with strategic partners and stakeholders across the three spheres of government, Chapter 9 institutions, academics, civil society organizations, women formation, as well as ordinary South African women across the country. Honorable members and delegates, some of the key findings emanating from the provincial and district level rollout of the 25-year review of the Women's Charter for Effective Equality included, and I want to list them: the poor gender responsive planning processes, the poor institutionalization of gender responsive budgeting processes, the poor coordination between the three spheres and the implementation of strategic policies, legislation, and programs, the weak translation of gender equality commitments into fiscal commitments. And that is one issue that came up very strongly, that we speak gender, but we don't implement the programs that will enable us to have gender equality. Particularly when we make commitments, but the budget doesn't follow the specific commitments that are being made. The lack of gender disaggregated data, and that is a general issue that have been identified by different stakeholders and role players to say that there is just not enough data to ensure that the programs or the functions will follow the programs. The poor translation of our national agenda on women empowerment programs. The gender discourse, particularly on issues of women, is often events-driven with no qualitative impact across provinces, districts, and localities. The lack of effective implementation of key policy and legislative instruments developed for addressing gender-related matters. The gaps in the existing policies and legislative instruments, which require further strengthening in order to ensure mandatory implementation. The national gender machinery is often ineffective, weakly coordinated, and lacks a coherent approach in relation to advancing the rights of women. The review process of the Women's Charter for Effective Equality has given us definitely a better understanding of the objective and subjective factors which are likely to impede gender transformation. This process has also equipped us with tools of analysis to devise pertinent ways and means of achieving a non-sexist gender-based society. Through the countrywide, provincial, metro, and district level review engagement, Parliament was able to gather valuable information and findings, which have become the basis upon which sustained engagements with provinces, metros, and districts will now continue to be based on, particularly for the advancement of gender equality through the various mechanisms necessary. And I just want to emphasize the fact that we actually decided to follow a district engagement approach because of the fact that government envisaged to have the district development model. And I think the information, the data, the stats, or the information that we have gathered will be able to assist in this model, particularly when it's implemented, to make sure that issues of gender and of women can be actually have a basis from where they can start with those that have been involved in this process, of which we got valuable information from those that have been involved in this process at the different level of the districts. The newly developed Women's Charter for Accelerated Development will require a social compact and a resolute commitment to re-engineer systemic and institutional arrangements across the three spheres of government, to enable gender-sensitive good governance policy redesign, planning, budgeting, and implementation practices. The newly development charter will also need to be tabled in both houses of parliament in order to satisfy institutional requirements, which will make it a binding document in deepening and advancing the women's agenda. We call upon the theater of ideas. We appeal to you to interact with this document and make it a document which echoes the voices of the women of South Africa, a point of reference in advancing effective equality. The Women's Charter for Accelerated Development has been developed as a framework of targeted interventions to accelerate the realization of gender equality. It means we must be deliberate and consistent in our commitment to create platforms for engagement for the newly developed charter so that it can become a people's charter. What are some of the key things that must be done to ensure the success of the charter? We will have to development of a policy design would be undertaken or must be undertaken with gender sensitivity at its core, including the NDP, the provincial growth and development strategies, integrated development plans, as well as the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. We will have to amend our money bills in order to inculcate mandatory gender-sensitive budgetary processes to ensure that no budget is passed without tangible gender-responsive plans across the three spheres of government. We will have to re-engineer the state machinery and the bureaucratic apparatus in order to ensure that the precepts of building a capable developmental state are given expression with the gender-sensitive approaches to planning, budgeting, and implementation processes. Institutionalization arrangement and mechanisms that pertain to the national gender machinery must be improved with clear objectives and priorities to cut across all spheres of government. We will need to develop the necessary analytical and methodological tools and mechanisms for the monitoring, evaluation, and adherence to gender-responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing framework, and ensure its implementation across the spheres of government. Legislative sector committees will have to integrate and institutionalize gender-sensitive oversight indicators and lawmaking processes. We will have to do away with weak forms of coordination and collaboration within and across the spheres of government and the broader NGO movement. Gender focal points should form part of all provincial planning structures and be part of senior decision makers in departments, agencies of the state, as well as municipalities. The Women's Charter for Accelerated Development have been developed as an embodiment of the perspectives and aspirations, as we conclude, shared by women's formations all over South Africa, by civil society organizations and interest groups across 9 provinces and 44 districts of the country. The review process was supported by the Chapter 9 institutions and statutory bodies, including Stats SA, the Commission for Gender Equality, the Finance and Fiscal Commission, the South African Law Reform Commission, the Judiciary, the 3 spheres of government, the legislative sector. All 9 provincial legislators have been deeply involved in the process, national, provincial, and district executives, the United Nations Development Programme, the South African Medical Research Council, including various academics and economists. To all of the above institutions, we as Parliament would like to express our appreciation in supporting us in our quest for deepening outcomes-based oversight, which is people-centered and people-driven. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, I would love to, if possible, the officials give us a glimpse of the beautiful document that we have developed as a culmination of our process, and henceforth everyone will have to engage and involve with that document. With that, I want to thank you. Ke a leboga, siyabulela. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, me. We appreciate your insightful remarks. Shall we
Elbongwe.
Kamala
Yes.
Makosika.
Kamala Makosikazi.
Okay. The next presentation, now having had the main indicator of the findings and so on, we now invite the chairperson of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, Mayor Kate Bilangulu. Chairperson? Chairperson Bilangulu, are you connecting, linking?
Chair, Program Director.
Absolutely. Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Program Director, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable S.E. Zinoli, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party, Mayor Majodina, the Chairperson of the National Assembly, Honorable A. Masondo, Deputy Chair of the NCOP, Honorable S.E. Lucas, the President of the ANC Women's League, Comrade Batabi Lendamini, the Deputy Minister, Dr. Hlengiwe Mkhize, and the convener of the South African Progressive Women's Movement, honorable members, chief whips and speakers, Commission for Gender Equality, members of our civil society representing women's formation from all the provinces, ladies and gentlemen, Absheni, good morning. Deputy Speaker, I'm attending this launch today for a women's charter. Meanwhile, my heart is building. Simple because recently we have heard about the high number of teenage pregnancy. I was asking myself as to why this thing, why this state during this month? Is it a well-planned thing to undermine women, or is just a coincidence of some kind? But it's the question to answer some time to come. Deputy Speaker, I would like to start my statement of support firstly by honoring the multi-party women's structures that drafted the Women's Charter of 1954 and Women's Charter for Effective Equality for 1994. The social activism displayed by those women has set a pattern for generations to come. They drafted very crucial documents during very different and difficult times in their political lives. The Women's Charter for Effective Equality was drafted to ensure constitutional women's rights and protection in the new political dispensation. Secondly, Deputy Speaker, I would like to honor the fourth Parliament Multi-Party Women Caucus, which gave birth to the idea of assessing progress attained in achieving the article of the Women's Charter for Effective Equality. But due to various factors, we were not able to fulfill the desire. The launch of the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development during a year that we have declared as the Charlotte Maxeke year, for me, has great significance. Mama Maxeke, a dynamic leader with impeccable foresight, was against gender inequality in all its forms. Her fight for gender equality was viewed as being against known and or accepted norms and values of a traditional African society. And as such, the period was unfriendly to women, but she persisted and empowered women to stand up for their rights. The Women's Charter for Accelerated Development has also been drafted in very different and difficult times due to COVID-19, gender-based violence and femicide, and other social ills that women are facing. Each generation of women will always face difficult times, but as citizens, men and women, we need to realize that we all have roles to play to accelerate development and remove all barriers that inhibit achievement of equality, no matter what difficult circumstances we are facing. As the Multi-Party Women Caucus, we have a crucial role to play as a collective and as individual members to ensure that identified priorities are addressed. Our members have multiple membership in various parliamentary committees. So I urge our members to be vigilant and ensure effective oversight in their various committees. As a collective, the Multi-Party Women Caucus is positioned not only to stimulate debate on matters affecting women, but also to inspire change. And as such, we will continue to fight until equal becomes a reality for all. As Multi-Party Women Caucus, we will take this new Women's Charter and use it as an additional planning tool to programmatize activities towards strengthening and identifying the weaknesses. As the Multi-Party Women Caucus, we believe in empowerment of women, so I urge all of us here to popularize this document. Let us take it to our provinces, our constituencies, and our communities. Let us use all the avenues at our disposal to empower women in all walks of life about this document. I also urge all Multi-Party Women Caucuses in provincial and local government spheres to use this document as an additional and important planning tool when choosing focus areas. This will ensure that all priority areas of the Women's Charter for accelerated development are totally achieved in all spheres of government. Lastly, I would like to salute all women who fought for women emancipation and our rights. We find ourselves gathered like this today simply because of them. Amandla. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Vigilance, empowerment,
Amandla.
effective communication, and both individually and collectively object of the Charter. Thank you very much, ma'am. Let's invite the next speaker. And Mayor Dlamini has requested Honorable Rosina Siminya to speak on her behalf. Rosina, are you there?
Yes, Honorable Speaker, Deputy Speaker, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Go ahead.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, Chief Whip of the Majority Party, and all organizations that are represented in this gathering. On behalf of the President of the Women's League, I would like to firstly put her apology because she's not feeling well. Secondly, that I present her notes. She loved to be part of the, she wanted to be part of this gathering. Honorable Chairperson, the speaking notes for the President of the Women's League, which is Bathabile Dlamini, is as follows. Speaking notes for the President of the ANC Women's League, Ms. Bathabile Dlamini, the launch of the Women's Charter for accelerated development, setting a 25-year vision and the agenda for women equality, Growth and Development on the enjoining the Women's Charter of 2021 to its historical roots. Honorable Chair, foundation of the Women's Charters campaign in 1954, the women of South Africa, led by our leadership, those that came before us, converged at the conference to draft a women's charter, which has come to symbolize the lasting legacy of strength of multiple racial gender politics in South Africa. It was evident from the outset of this conference that women were not to be mobilized only for the broader liberation struggle only, but for specific gender equality concern. Organizers of the conference offered credence to their intentions to address the preconceived engendered role by even persuading men to do catering. Through the Women's Charter, women laid the blueprint of their claim for the gender equality. Amongst others, the Charter demanded the removal, I quote, from our society, all the social differences developed in past time between men and women, which have the effect of keeping our sex in a position of inferiority and subordination. The Charter also resolved to work for the change in the laws of marriage, which have the effect of placing wife in the position of legal subjections to husband and giving husband the powers to dispose of wives' properties and earnings and dictate to them in all matters affecting them and their children. Notably, the importance of the political consciousness was made a priority through the Charter. Women saw it as a duty and privilege to enlist all women in our struggle for emancipation and to bring to them all realization of the intimate relation that exists between their status of inferiority as women and the inferior status to which their people are subjected by discriminatory laws and colors and prejudice. It was also under the strategic direction of FSAW that the historic march to the Union Building by approximately 20,000 women from diverse backgrounds was organized on the 9th August 1956 in protest against the past laws. Although the immediate project of South African women was the anti-past campaign, the Federation was also involved in more strategic process, such as the drafting of the Freedom Charter in Klipstown in 1955. The foundation of the Women's Charter campaign in 1994, the Women's Charter campaign was led under the umbrella of the National Women's Coalition, and the National Women's Coalition, formed in April 1992, was a structural lobby of approximately 60 to 70 organizations representing women from across political parties, race, class, and other divides. The primary aims of the Charter campaign was to consult with women throughout South Africa about their problems, needs, and hopes for their new democratic dispensation. Through the Charter campaign, the National Women's Coalition would draft and present the Women's Charter for effective equality to the Convention of the Democratic South Africa, which was called CODESA, for the inclusion in the draft of Bill of Rights. The Charter campaign followed a dual process of action, research, and campaigning. The research process was conducted using qualitative mixed research method such as focus group, questionnaires, chain letters, community reports, tribunals, and in-depth interviews. The campaigning process prioritized community engagement on 5 issues, namely women legal status, women and land, women and violence, women and health, women and work. The campaign was estimated to have reached more than 20 million participants. The Women's Charter for Effective Equality 1994 identified 2 main conditions for the effective inclusion of women's equality concerns in the new states, namely the increased presence of women in decision-making bodies and positions. 2, the establishment of the state structures to monitor the gendered impact for public policies. Linking 1954 and 1994 Charter, important notes to make. How does the Women's Charter of 2021 link with the national gender machinery? Where will the capacity to implement the Charter be found, and how will resources be mobilized for? And how do we ensure that women's descriptive empowerment also equates to substantive empowerment of other women? I thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mayor. Much appreciated. Let's move next. Lebogang Mutiba has been requested by Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize to represent her because of a clash of commitments. So let's ask Lebogang to do so.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Oh, ungena nge-window manje.
Prof is back.
It's tough. It's tough. It's tough.
Okay, it's all right. All right, go ahead, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will ask to switch off my video because
okay.
I don't know what the network is really bad here.
It's okay, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity on behalf of the Progressive Women's Movement of South Africa. When women are shouting there, saying Malibongwe, it's in my heart as well, with Malibongwe. A man is cheering for us, and we're talking about a women's charter during the month of August. It's significant that this launch is taking place at the time when we are commemorating the 150th anniversary of Mayor Charlotte Manyamaxeke. You know that this name, Mayor Charlotte Manyamaxeke, it's very difficult to digest and finish it. You look at her life as an activist, as an artist, as an academic, as a community leader, a woman of sound values and principle, as well as a leader within the church. But above everything, in evoking the spirit of Mayor Charlotte during National Women's Month, we call her words. If you can rise, bring somebody with you. We don't have time today to talk a lot about what is it that made her to stand out. I think her perseverance, her consistency, and her fight within her own organizations, she constantly raised the women's question. If she heard that there was a meeting, then she will go and say, what about women? What about the question of women? Are they included in this meeting? What will it take to include them? So for me, when we talk about the charter is not something we ought to talk about when the going is easy and when things are good. But in a principled way, in an inconsistent manner, we have to embrace the charter and begin. I'm not going to repeat what other women have said about the Charter for Effective Equality of 1994 and where we are today. But for me, what's important to emphasize is that let's embrace what we're talking about. The document that will come out of this important parliamentary process must be a lived value in good and bad times, in season and out of season. We should be the one on an ongoing basis to remind the public, to remind our organizations, to remind younger people, because we're talking generational equality, to say that we have this charter which should guide us in our activism. Chairperson, I want to take this opportunity to really thank Honorable Sylvia Lucas and her esteemed team. For us, as the Progressive Women's Movement, we've really appreciated her leadership. The honorable members of the National Council of Provinces, they've been leading this review across all 9 provinces, 44 districts, and 8 metropolitan municipalities. It is out of this extensive review that the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development has emerged. On behalf of all women in this country, we welcome this wonderful and exciting document, which so illustriously and comprehensively sets out an agenda for women's advancement and development for the next 25 years. In 2020, the world marked the 25th anniversary of the 4th World Conference for Women and the adoption of the Beijing Platform. But where are we today? It is therefore rather appropriate that our charter launched today is one for accelerated development towards women's equality, growth, and development. But even as I was preparing this message of support to this launch, I was seriously troubled by the news that Gauteng alone recorded 23,226 teenage pregnancies in 1 year between April 2020 and March 2020. There are 934 girls between the ages of 10 and 14 years who have become mothers, while 2,976 girls between the ages of 10 and 19 years have chosen to terminate their pregnancies. This is simply the tip of the iceberg as its own Gauteng, and does not account for abortions performed privately, nor does it account for unregistered births. So this is a frightening reality when girls of 10 years become mothers. This is statutory rape in our country, yet we wake up and normalize it, and it's business as usual. We start thinking about child support, we start thinking about girls to go back to school. We will have to look carefully at where we are and really move towards seeing this as a serious crime against a girl child, and also ensuring that we campaign and we are actively ensuring that perpetrators are held accountable. This kind of activism that women and women's organization demonstrated has brought about the focused attention on the issue. And since then, we have the National Strategic Plan to end gender-based violence. But I think as we launch this charter, these are some of the issues which we have to articulate and see how as we move forward as a country, we don't make a charter just a piece of paper, but we identify issues of activism, issues around which we should mobilize women across all sectors and make sure that no one is left behind, young and old, but we have a common understanding of the fight we are putting up. So I'm glad that I could get just one example that brings all of us together. Of course, gender-based violence is an ongoing concern. It's one area which we should always look at as we mobilize. Rebuilding back better around economic inclusion is another area which I'm sure each and every woman who has attended today will be able to say poverty is the worst enemy. Unemployment of young people it is what is a real threat to our security. So I just want to say that it is critical to actively revive the vibrancy of women's collectivism. We can attain gender equality through sustained and collective activism, institutionalized law reform in order to continuously assess the impact of legislation and collectively accelerate efforts towards the attainment of Vision 2030. Malibongwe.
Igama lamakhosikazi. Yes. Yeah. No, thank you very much.
Mama.
Thank you very much. Let's proceed to the next speaker, who is Honorable Zet Nkomo, who is a whip from the Multi-Party Women's Caucus.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Let me start by greeting yourself, the Deputy Chair and the Chairperson of the NCOP, Ministers and Deputy Ministers present, honorable members, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. I greet you all. Let me take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank the Office of the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly and the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP for bringing to life this important project that started as an idea by the 4th Parliament Multi-Party Women's Caucus. They not only help us to achieve an idea, but went further by facilitating drafting a new charter, which is called the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development 2021. The drafting and launching of this new charter, Women's Charter, once again, has demonstrated to us that when women are united across racial and party political lines, they are able to achieve more. Women's Charter for Accelerated Development 2021 will assist us in identifying the most significant social, political, and economic issues and struggles currently facing women. As the country, we have achieved a lot in terms of advancement of women, but there are still social, political, and economic problems that we need to tackle. Women still bears the brunt of unpaid care work. Female households are the poorest, and economic status of women has been worsened by the COVID-19. As women in this country, we are the majority victims of gender-based violence and femicide. We have not yet even achieved the 50% political representation. Local government elections are around the corner, and in an absence of mandatory gender quotas, I, as the whip of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, take this opportunity to encourage and urge all political parties to adopt the 50-50 gender quotas. Gender equality within the local government is very critical because local government is the closest to the people, and a 50-50 representation within a municipality council is a key to accelerated development and gender-responsive provision of services, as well as improvement of social, economic, and political status of women in communities. We also need to ensure that this charter is among guiding documents to be used during district development models engagement. The launch of this Women's Charter for Accelerated Development 2021 has provided us with an important technique to utilize in all our planning activities as multi-party women's caucus. One of the priority focus areas of the multi-party women's caucus is about the status of women in vulnerable sectors of economy, and this charter will provide an excellent tool and serve as a voice of women during our engagement. Gender-based violence and femicide is among current and pressing social problems that we need to address. Having a well-crafted roadmap, such as this new charter, which is informed by voices of women, will greatly assist in our engagement with the lead departments dealing with various aspects of the adopted National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. I agree with the chairperson of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus about popularizing this document to women at grassroots level. Let us all unite towards the successful achievement of all priorities identified in the new charter. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Me. We appreciate your insights there, that the historical, what we call national grievance, as articulated partly in the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, is gathering life. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable Khan Sharif. Honorable Sharif, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Mm-hmm.
All protocol observed. When going through the Women's Charter, it is very difficult not to get emotional, or at least for me, to see how far we have come from the development of the first Women's Charter in 1954. As a young South African woman born in 1990, it goes without saying, thank you to those who have come before us and paved the road to a more equal South Africa for women. While it is important to acknowledge where we come from, it is equally important to ensure we continue laying the bricks to where we want to go and create the type of society we want to live in. I am honored to have been part of this historic event of reviewing the Women's Charter. The Women's Charter for Accelerated Development 2021 provides a detailed roadmap on the role of government and partnerships with civil society to outline the next steps in ensuring equality between genders. In order for government to accelerate the development of women, it must construct gender-sensitive development policies and legislative instruments. Without the development and the implementation of such policies and instruments, the Women's Charter will remain a document that serves no real purpose except to perpetuate an unreachable idea that has no meaning to the women of this country. The Women's Charter, priority action number 2, advancing gender equality through effectively mainstreamed development policy and government planning instruments across the 3 spheres of government under Strategic Objective 1, which is to accelerate the realization of gender equality, outlines the necessary steps to implementing the Charter across governments. In this section, the role of national government is outlined as within the National Development Plan, the National Spatial Development Framework, as well as the Medium-Term Strategic Framework. The goal of implementation becomes central to the success within national, provincial, and local governments for more gender-sensitive planning, budgeting, and mainstreaming of policies and legislation. The principle of equality, as outlined in priority number 2, states that it will find expression in strategic and annual performance plans of national and provincial departments and sector plans. It is through these strat plans and APPs that oversight happens, and that holding the executives and departments accountable becomes a key priority. At a provincial level, this will be mainstreamed through provincial growth and development strategies, provincial spatial development frameworks, and provincial development plans of all 9 provinces. At a local government level, this will happen through integrated development plans and district development model processes across district and local municipalities. The role of any legislature in South Africa is to ensure implementation, transparency, and accountability through oversight and monitoring and evaluation. For any legislative instrument to work, oversight and monitoring and evaluation must form part and parcel of those instruments in order to ensure proper implementation. Acceleration of gender equality will heavily depend on the political will and direction by executives to their respective departments and departmental heads. The role of the legislatures, especially for women public representatives across the 3 spheres of government, will be responsible to do effective oversight for accountability and to ensure implementation, as well as assessing if the lives of women and those who identify as LGBT have been positively changed. We all have a role to play to cultivate a more equal, free, and fair society, not only for us, but like those who marched to the Union buildings in 1956 to pave a way for those who come after us. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Effective implementation cuts across almost all the speakers who have spoken so far. And so that's the watchword that we should carry as we leave this meeting today. Now, the next speaker, also from the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, is Honorable Majosi, Ms. S. Majosi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I think it's a human error. It's Honorable Z. Majosi, my initials.
Zandile Majosi, how?
Yes.
Bazenzo Home Affairs. They mustn't do that. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thanks, ma'am.
As we gather here today, to witness the launch of the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development and its 25-year vision on how to advance equality, we have to acknowledge the dire and terrifying realities facing women in our country. Undeniably, the COVID-19 pandemic has not only worsened deeply entrenched inequalities, but the social and economic consequences brought about by the pandemic have had a much greater impact on the women of our country. The urgency of this dire situation cannot be emphasized more. It is now more than ever that we need to demand actions from the executives. The review of the 1994 Women's Charter and the many stakeholders consulted in the process show us that as Parliament, we need to scrutinize performance targets of the executive and hold those assigned to advance women's rights accountable. In the 2018-2019 financial year, the Department of Women and Youth and Persons with Disability achieved a dismal 69% of its annual target. This is simply unacceptable. The department managed to improve on its shocking performance by achieving 80% of its target in the 2019-2020 financial year. Parliament needs to keep the finger on the pulse. Government policies have to be met by tangible performance targets and adequate budget to reflect this commitment. As the Charter sadly highlights, there have been no real strategic and performance plans to bring about real transformation and to ensure equality and to advance women's rights over the last 25 years. The Women's Charter compiled by Parliament underscores the desperation faced by women and the countless systemic obstacles hindering the advancement of women in our country. The Charter ambitiously sets 15 strategic objectives to advance women's rights and break down systemic barriers that hold women back from participating in and reaping the benefits of our democratic society. These strategic objections and priority actions can only be lip service. One of the key objectives of the Charter is to grow an inclusive economy and to ensure that a gender imperative informs economic growth policy frameworks. The Charter emphasizes that priority actions in this regard must include a focus on women-owned SMMEs and increase the number of women who manage, own, and control enterprises. The Charter furthermore envisions that the government, as a priority, must regularly analyze interventions to accelerate recovery, reconstruction, and transformation. The reality is that these priority actions are not new. The National Development Plan 2030 stipulates in no uncertain terms that the government must actively seek to build an inclusive society and foster the active participation of women in our economy. However, these commitments ring hollow if not met by adequate funding and proper leadership to ensure delivery on these promises. The review of the 1994 Women's Charter was essential to identify the obstacles hindering equality and to identify our strategic objections. However, we cannot wait for another review to show us the writing on the wall. We need to act. We need to aggressively respond to mismanagement of funds and corruption and remove those from power who are feasting on resources that could be used to advance women's rights. Let us not wait for another 25 years to act. Let us deliver on our promises to the women and women of South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nkomo. Sorry for the mistake about your name. Yes, scrutiny
and you still
is the weight.
It's Majosi, not Nkomo. Majosi.
Majosi. Deputy Chair, by the way, the reason for your presence here is scrutiny that you've just done. Thank you very much. It's a good illustration of how to keep us in check. Yeah. I meant, okay. Let's move on now to Honorable Mhlangwini. Natasha, it's your turn, man.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. And I believe your acting speakership is now gone, since we have a female.
Oh no! Please don't rub it in.
Don't do that to him.
don't rub it in, Natasha.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. When the first Women's Charter was developed in 1954, the South African political landscape was vastly different place altogether. The repressive apartheid regime have deepened its claws onto the social fabric of South Africa, and women were, and as they always have been, the worst affected. When the second Women's Charter was adopted in 1994, millions of women in this country were very hopeful for fundamental change. For far too long, South African women, Black in particular, have been subjected to subhuman living conditions. The humanity stripped and the membership of society not recognized. Belonging to a race that was considered subhuman and being of a gender that was looked down upon, African women had to endure and African women have to endure what seemed insurmountable difficulties. But they persisted, they fought, and they are still fighting today. We are able to take up the spear and continue fighting for what should be a basic human rights, because women's rights are human rights. While challenges facing women's development have evolved over time, the key elements of the problems hampering women's development are still essentially the same. Over 42% of South African households are headed by women, meaning that women alone shoulder the responsibility of child raising, while also responsible for the well-being of other family dependents. 52 of all these women-headed households are poor. Women constitutes. The unemployment rate of women is consistently higher than that of men. And those who are able to, and those that are employed are getting paid between 90% to 30%, 37% lesser than men. Every single year, the basic education system loses over 500,000 learners, most of whom are girls' pupils. These girls will grow up with as well the ranks of women who are more vulnerable to abuse in workplaces and to the abuse in homes. These structural challenges that are today the realization of the objectives set out for Women's Charter. In order to unleash the full potential of women's development, we must be able to address these challenges. We need to be in a position to convert with ideals and encapsulate it in the Charter into concrete, workable and measurable objectives for each of the government departments. The Department of Basic Education must be to account for each girl who enter a school from grade 1 up till grade 12. It must not be accepted as normal that where children drop out of school, because each child, girl child in particular, that drops out is a girl child too many. The police must held to a far higher standard when it comes to handling cases of women abuse. It is unacceptable that many of these cases reported at police stations never being on trial because of excuses of lack of evidence and generally poor investigative work. The justice system in its entirety must be the one that is sensitized to the systematic nature of women oppression. Most importantly, this charter will not get a dust if we not double our efforts to ensure that women attain economic freedom in our lifetime. Women must have access to land, to the markets, that they must get production support when they want to start their own businesses. They must be employed without men demanding sexual favors. True equality and development lies in the basic and fundamental ideals, and these are not possible when we still have a state that primarily serves the interest of capital, such as the state we have today. We refuse to be pawns in a game of men. We refuse to be used by men to pamper their egos when it's convenient for them. We refuse to celebrate when other women are out, down and out. We are for the full development of women. We are and have always been ready for women leadership. We are for the elimination of all form of discrimination that mainly are at women. Those ideals we will fight for until the end of time. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much, Natasha. I am going to take a sip of water to celebrate your reference to what happened yesterday in the House. I'll drink to that. Thank you very much, honorable members. This has been usefully presented insights by all the speakers, and emphasizes issues that partly galvanized the reason for review itself. And so let me hand over to the Deputy Chair to take the next session. As to the remark of Honorable Hlengiwe Mkhize, the professor, that it's a man here co-chairing with the Deputy Chair. In the remarks of Dr. Madume Kganagha later on will be the answer to that issue. I will not go into it. Thank you very much. Deputy Chair, please take over.
Chairperson is Honorable Sakas or Stukas not available. Is she not going to speak?
Honorable who?
Sakas, is it Sakas or Sukas? As you see. Is she not going?
No, okay, all right. No. That's a mistake. I nearly made a mistake to my friend. How can I do that? Please, no. Let's give Honorable Sukars, also from the multi-party caucus, to speak, because you will be then the one who leads us to the next session. Please go ahead, my apologies for nearly doing harm, but fortunately, I can't falter with the deputy chair next to me.
Thank you, Chairperson. I am sitting outside just for the connection. I trust that you can hear me well.
Absolutely, it's very clear, yeah.
Honorable Chair, it's an honor to participate in the launch of the Women Charter for Accelerated Development. In reading the Charter, it is impossible not to hear the voices of a generation of women who took up the baton to advance women economically and socially during what can only be described as the most tumultuous time in the history of our nation. Women from all sectors and political affiliations reached into the future to define the imperatives of improving the lives of women and charted a definition in the context of the challenges of economic disparity, social injustice, and poverty. Today, that baton is being handed over to women.
Sorry, Marie. Please, man, just watch your microphones because they really disruptive. Go ahead, man. Thank you. They have muted.
Today, that baton has been handed over to women in the legislatures of our country, churches of our nation, in business and the social sector to remember the character, fortitude, and faith of the giants that came before us. We are met with this great challenge to define the history we will hand over to the next generation. And this document, Chair, speaks to that future we aim to carve out. The injustice of apartheid and segregation is not the context of our time. Our present danger is the high levels of poverty, broken families that leads to increased rates of gender-based violence, and the biggest health crises of our time, COVID-19. The emotional and psychological cost of poverty and violence on the psyche of women and her children is an unbearable load to carry. In South Africa, our beloved country, Chair, women suffers heartbreak every day. The economic advancement of women is, therefore, a key catalyst to an equal society. COVID-19 amplified the conditions of poverty and inequality among women. And poverty defines choice, where a woman lives, where children learn, and the type of healthcare available to her. It is unimaginable, as we discuss this, Chair, that 27 years after our democracy, a woman can still wait for a minor procedure such as a cyst removal for over a year. The accelerated development of women is an imperative. It's an imperative because of who she is. Her life and well-being are inexplicably tied to the future of generations. There can be no greatness without a woman. She is the channel through which all human life comes. It demands that we stand as one to ensure that we remove the barriers to learning, health, and wellness that pushes her to the back of the room. We face the danger that an aggressive liberal ideological push may fragment the demand for a united society-wide response to the challenges we face in eradicating inequality and the consequences of poverty on women. The issues faced by women needs a recognition of the faith community and its role in addressing inequality. It demands that we recognize the chief tenets of our Constitution, freedom of religion as a pursuit of a just and equal society in which women prosper. For this document to be realized, we must unite and virtue must be embraced. The virtue and value of women and of girl children. Chair, thank you so much for the invitation to speak on this. It's highly appreciated.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marie Sukars. Honorable members, ladies across the board and gentlemen who may be joining me today, this session will now be taken over by the Deputy Chair. Deputy Chair, I've just sent you a message about changes to the UN that Ayo will represent the UN family. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I hope we will also progress the way you have been progressing. You have been handling it very well. I don't want them to discriminate against you because of the fact that you are a man, because you've been so involved in this whole process. We are also commemorating today the launching of the United Democratic Front in the 1980s. So it is very befitting that we are busy with the launch of the reviewed Women's Charter. And we will then now continue. And the following session will be the Chapter 9 institutions and all the, particularly United Nations Development Program and SANAC Men sector was also very much involved in the whole process. So we will now call on Ms. Tamara Matebula of the Chairperson of the Commission on Gender Equality. May, over to you. May Matebula, are you on the platform?
Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you.
Adjust my mic. Sorry about that. Program Director, thank you very much, and the organizers of this important event. Thank you for inviting me. Deputy Speaker and the National Assembly, Honorable Sinoli. Let me also acknowledge the Chairperson of the National Assembly, Baba Masonto, Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Mayor Lucas. I stand on the protocol observed. There is no better time than now, which is the National Women's Month, and in particular this year when we are celebrating Charlotte Manyema Day, to launch this newly developed and Women's for Accelerated Development. And we must remember that this is a month in a time which is set aside to actually begin to recognize the role that the women play and the achievements that women have achieved over the time. And these critical roles that women have played are continuing, and the women are still playing pivotal role in the society. Program Director, the previous Women's Charter of 1954 and respectively 1994 emphasized the need for a society where women are free from discrimination, they are free from prejudices on the basis of gender. So those two charters both called for a society which respects women and enforces their rights and inherent human dignity. Therefore, our Constitution of South Africa clearly lays out a foundation for protection of women's rights. Further, Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights, the cornerstone of our democracy, as well as Chapter 9, have the equality clauses which provide the legal framework within which gender equality is protected and forbids any kind of discrimination against anyone on the grounds of race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, sexual orientation, ethnic, and social origin. Looking back, we realized that in 1994, a gender-sensitive legislative framework have been put in place with a view to ensure gender equality and empowerment of women. Key amongst these was the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination, which is called PEPUDA. This actually became one of the national legislations mandated by Section 9(4) of the Constitution, and thus enjoys special constitutionality. Significantly, PEPUDA recognizes the need to address systemic discriminations and specifically aims at eradicating all kinds of social as well as economic inequality. Further, Section 8 of the PEPUDA speaks to the prohibition of discrimination on the grounds 6, neither the state or any person may unfairly discriminate against a person, nor persons may unfairly discriminate against any person on the grounds of gender, including gender-based violence, systems of preventing women inheriting family properties and land, including traditional, customary, and religious practices which impair the rights of women and undermine equality between women and men. Any policy that unfairly discriminates women on the basis of access to land, access to finance, and other resources, and discrimination on the grounds of poverty, limiting women to access all kinds of
Hello. I don't know, is it just me or is Matamara not audible?
I think there's a background noise.
Members? Hello?
There was a background noise there. Can I continue? Can I continue?
You may continue, but you're not so audible. Can you just speak directly into your gadget?
Okay, and I will switch off my video then, just in case.
Possibly it will assist.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Like the National Development Plan Vision 2030, this newly developed Women's Charter for Accelerated Development becomes the most comprehensive national blueprint document for advancing women's rights, whilst providing an opportunity and a formula to accelerate the implementation of the following 4 key most important areas. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Policies, with the view of making sure that as the Commission, we look at issues of gender equality and sustainable development, which are inextricably linked. Many of the barriers to effective sustainable policies are found in the outdated discriminatory social norms and legal systems, which we must constantly review and be replaced by the new legislative frameworks. We need to invest in girls and women through empowerment efforts, which will require radical interventions, breaking system barriers of power privilege that continue to leave millions behind. We need to continuously empower women and girls towards the realization of their human rights, as well as essential to the achievement of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The third one is that we need to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, which is integrally linked to ending poverty, eradicating hunger, achieving full employment, and decent work for women. The attainment of these goals is essential to the promotion of human rights, which is the essential right to livelihoods, well-being, as well as resilience of women and girls. This is an integral issue so that the women and girls are able to be free from all forms of violence, discrimination, and harmful practices. The fourth and the last one is to make sure that there is effective implementation of the gender responsive planning, implementation, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation, reporting in a sense that shows gender disaggregation, as well as audits, in order to make sure that we achieve gender mainstreaming in line with the national, regional, as well as international instruments, such as the Sustainable Development Goals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and all other 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And we need to make sure that this gender mainstreaming is observed at all levels, private, public, as well as our important stakeholders, which is the civil society organizations and women's political organizations at national, at provincial, as well as local levels. Therefore, it is fundamentally important that all these proposed priority areas and interventions in this Women's Charter document are well coordinated program director, and are well monitored. And we must collectively and individually begin to identify and mitigate risks and closely monitor and evaluate set outcomes and the impacts on a continuous basis. Program director, I just want to stress that the charter should actively draw its attention to the persistent prevalence of the double scourge of gender-based violence and COVID-19. Once we do that, we will be able to include or set realistic performance indicators to measure the outputs, the outcomes, and the impact indicators for gender equality priority area. So during the review process, I know that the Commission for Gender Equality was able to actively participate in all 9 provincial reviews and to provide quite substantive gender equality and transformation interventions, including gender mainstreaming efforts towards achieving transformation at all these levels. So the CGE pledges its support to keeping the high banner of equality, fraternity, and liberty. And we ensure that all citizens of our country, women, men, girls, and boys, would actually be able to rest upon all of these, making sure that all of us will work towards removing the burden from our society of gender inequality and gender inequity. In conclusion, I want to say that the Commission supports the newly developed Women's Charter for Accelerated Development, and we will monitor its implementation and we will report accordingly. Happy Women's Month, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Matebula, or Ms. Matebula. The Financial and Fiscal Commission has sent an apology, so they won't be able to attend. So we are now calling on Ms. Ntabiseng Makata from States SA.
Thank you, Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable Sylvia Lucas. Greetings to all honorable members present in this session here today, colleagues and friends representing various sectors of our society. Chairperson, honorable members and colleagues, there is no doubt that South Africa has made significant progress towards achieving gender equality since the first Women's Charter of 1954. As part of the global movement towards achieving gender equality by 2030, more needs to be done. Today, South Africa's progressive laws have seen more women serving in high-ranking positions in government than ever before. Having said this, challenges remain. And what better way to highlight these challenges than through the facts as reflected in the statistics of our country? Access to education by young girls and women has improved substantially over time. Gender parity ratios amongst those who are functionally literate increased from 0.95 in 2002 to 0.99 in 2019, indicating that more women are now literate. A gender parity ratio value of 0 implies no gender equality, while a value of 1 implies full gender equality. In South Africa and globally, one of the biggest challenges facing women is educational inequality. Access to education has played a pivotal role in ensuring that women have progressed to higher education levels. According to the 2019 Sustainable Development Goals Country Report, the country parity ratio for female participation in tertiary education was 1.39 during 2016, underpinning the fact that significant strides have been achieved in ensuring universal access to education for everyone. Employment inequality is still a challenge in our country, Chair. Female unemployment rate has remained higher than that of their male counterparts. As the chairperson noted in his opening remarks, this is indicative of apparent disparities between men and women in different facets of life, which leaves women lagging behind in terms of socio-economic opportunities. According to the latest unemployment figures released by Statistics South Africa, unemployment rates for males and females were 31.4% and 34% respectively. Of these, Black African women were the most vulnerable, with an unemployment rate of 38.3%. Disparities by sex and occupation show that females accounted for just 31.2% of those occupying managerial occupations. In addition, more women than men, and this is 52.6%, tended to be discouraged from participating in the labor market. Comparing Q1 of 2021 to Q1 of 2020, more than 4 in every 10 young females were not in employment, education, or training. Females were more likely to offer family commitment as a reason for not attending school than males, and that is 17.1% for women compared to 0.3% for men. We talk of equal pay for equal work. In terms of the perceptions on income being the catalyst for women to be independent, results of the Governance, Public Safety and Justice Survey by Statistics South Africa showed that only 55.6% of males believed that earning an income was the best way for women to be truly independent. On average, 64.7% of South Africans believed that women earning more than their partners would almost certainly cause trouble. 67.5% of males and 62% of females agreed with this sentiment. This is worrying. The country's gender pay gap is highlighted in a 2018 report based on the quarterly labor force survey by Statistics South Africa. It showed that the median monthly earnings were below parity at 0.76 in 2018, an improvement from 0.71 in 2013. Chairperson, these are but a few statistics that highlight the depth of the challenges that women in our country are still faced with. In conclusion, Chair, while notable progress has been achieved in the fight for gender equality, eradication of key challenges will enable young girls and women to improve their socio-economic well-being and lay claim to their fundamental human right. Statistics South Africa is honored to have been part of this important milestone in our country, to the review of the Women's Charter, which culminated in the 2021 Women's Charter for Accelerated Development that is being launched today. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ntabiseng Makata, the Acting Statistician General, and convey our sincere condolences to our SG on the bereavement that he has in his family. We are going to continue with our program, and we are now going to call on Dr. Odusola of the United Nations Development Program to continue with his message of support. The UNDP was also a very important part of the process.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The Deputy Chairperson of NCOP, Honorable S.E. Lucas, Deputy Speaker, National Assembly, Honorable Lechesa Zenoli, and the Chairperson, National Assembly, Honorable Masondo. All protocols observed. I bring warm greetings from the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Mrs. Nados Bekele Thomas, and all the other heads of UN agencies operating in South Africa. Thank you for inviting the United Nations through the United Nations Development Program to this auspicious occasion and the launch of the new Women's Charter for Accelerated Development 2021 to offer our message of support. This is an honor which will never be taken for granted. This event is a testimony to the legislative and oversight role that the South African Parliament is playing in advancing gender equality and women empowerment. We in the UN believe empowering girls and women makes our society richer, healthier, and freer. The United Nations system has championed the Sustainable Development Goals in the strong belief that women have a critical role to play in the achievement of all national development priorities that women's equality and empowerment are means and end of development. Accordingly, the United Nations is committed to making gender equality a basic human right and a necessity for sustainable world, which envisions a world of universal respect for human rights and human dignity, in which every woman and girl enjoys full gender equality and all legal, social, and economic barriers to their empowerment have been removed. It is for this reason that gender equality should be our reality as a progressive nation, because inclusive and sustainable development means everyone's voice is heard and no one is left behind. It is for this reason that gender equality is considered to be something that is at the core of development of any nation. In this regard, our roadmap to integrate gender equality into all aspects of our works is encapsulated in the UN Gender Equality Strategy and Action Plan, and our drive for gender equality seal standardization in public and private sectors. Honorable members, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the UN applauds the Parliament for this historic movement to build a dignified nation where girls and women are respected and protected. The Parliament has truly walked the talk of an African adage that says, you don't shave people's head in their absence. By including voices of all women for all women's formation, as well as ordinary South African women in all their diversity, is an indication of inclusiveness of the entire process. The Charter should be an important instrument to implement the district development model of the government. In this regard, the United Nations system in South Africa has been working closely with the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, COGTA, by supporting the implementation of DDM under the overall leadership of the United Nations Resident Coordinator. One of the 3 signature solutions adopted to support the implementation of DDM implementation is scaling up operational effectiveness of the Tutu Zala centers, a one-stop shop to address gender-based violence in the country, under the leadership of UN Women. This focuses on strengthening protection services for women and young girls against gender-based violence and promoting women participation in decision-making processes and the economy. Other signature solutions are strengthening community-targeted integrated service delivery through the Tutu Center under the leadership of UNDP, and creating job opportunities and facilitating entrepreneurship development through business solution centers under the leadership of Food and Agricultural Organization. Some of the efforts UNDP has put in place in South Africa to accelerate the implementation of Women Charter include, first, Girls in Robotics in partnership with the Department of Science and Innovation and the Danish government. Second, Automotive Skills Development through TVET colleges in partnership with the Department of Higher Education and Government of Japan. Third, Wind Energy Technology Technicians through SAWEB in partnership with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy and the Global Environmental Facility. And fourth, Women Emerging Farmers in partnership with Progressive Movement of South Africa, facilitated by Professor Helengwe Mkhize, the Deputy Minister for Women, Youth, and Persons with Disability. And finally, to reduce the time spent in fetching water in rural areas, we are working on the installation of wind turbine integrated mini-grid solution in the upper Blink water area in Eastern Cape. This is in addition to numerous interventions by other UN agencies like UN Women, UNICEF, UNFPA, ILO, UNAIDS, UNIDO, IOM, and WHO. In conclusion, honorable members, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a whole of society approach is key to the implementation of this charter. On behalf of the United Nations system in South Africa, I offer a message of support on the launch of this new Women Charter 2021, and confirm UN system in South Africa's commitment and continued support for the implementation of the Charter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ayo. One thing that you have been emphasizing, and we agree with, if we don't cooperate and we don't work together, there is no way that we will be able to make sure that the implementation of the achieve or whatever we want to achieve through the Charter will be able to be implemented. So thank you very much for the 3 inputs already that is showing that there is support for what we've been doing. We will now call on Professor Domingo of the Law Reform Commission to continue with the input. Professor Domingo.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Chairperson of the National Assembly, Honourable Members of Parliament, fellow Commissioners, representatives of civil society, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, all protocols observed. As a Commissioner of the South African Law Reform Commission, I head up 3 projects at the Commission which directly affect the lives of women, and that is the Family Dispute Resolution Bill, the relocation of families with specific reference to minors, and the most talked about bill, which is the Single Marriage Act. The South African Law Reform Commission is located in the Department of Justice and Institutional Development as part of the Legislative Development Branch. Projects identified by the Commission over the years have sought to contribute to women, including the girl child's empowerment and gender equality. These projects have included matters such as maintenance, prostitution, equitala, and issues pertaining to marriage which speak directly to vulnerable women and children. The law as an instrument of gender equity and gender justice means a process of developing and sustaining accountability mechanisms for inequalities. It means investing in institutions to dispense justice in a gender-sensitive manner. It implies access to and control over resources combined with the ability of women to make free and voluntary choices, which includes access to justice. The achievement of gender justice and gender equality depends on a complex web of gender norms, prevailing and played out in different settings at an individual, relationship, community, and societal level. Law is but one of the tools that can be used to guide the realization of gender justice and transformation. The South African Law Reform Commission welcomes the launch of the Women's Charter during this very auspicious month called Women's Month. We support and commit ourselves to the realization of the Women's Charter for accelerated development, setting a 25-year vision and agenda to advance women's equality, growth, and development. And so I'm reminded of our Constitutional Court logo. Our Constitutional Court logo in South Africa is a tree with people underneath it. It was taken from the site of a traditional dispute resolution. And so when you look at this logo and we think about it, under a tree, everybody that walks past can join. And as we launch the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development today, I envision that we will all work together collaboratively. We are the branches of that tree, rooted in the values of a constitutional democracy where women's voices are heard, which will give fruit to the total emancipation of women from all forms of oppression and exclusion. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Madam, just before you fight with me, I had to change my gadget now and connect from my phone because I have a problem with my iPad. So I'm just apologizing if there is any change in quality of this of the visuals. Let us continue, and thank you very much, Professor Domingo. Thank you also for the fact that through our Law Reform Commission, we were able to understand better with regards to the issues of implementation of legislation, but also to how our legislation can respond to the issues raised by our women. Thank you very much for your input, and thank you for your support throughout the process also as the Commission. We will now continue, and we will call on Professor Rachel Jukes. Professor Jukes, thank you very much. I've learned so much from you during our process where we had the summit on the issues of femicide and particularly on femicide and rape. We have learned so much from you. So now we are going to request the South African Medical Science Research Council, Professor Jukes, to continue with the input. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Programme Director. Deputy Speaker, Deputy Chair of the National Council of Provinces, honourable members of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. Thank you very much for inviting me today to give a message of support from the South African Medical Research Council for the Women's Charter. It's really a great opportunity to have an honour to be able to participate in this flagship occasion. The Charter plots an essential pathway for accelerated development of women, mapping out strategies to overcome the key obstacles in the path to this goal. At the South African Medical Research Council, we particularly welcome the reassertion of the entitlement of women to live without violence, the reassertion of the legal protection of women from violence, and the rights of victims to justice and redress, including the rights to post-rape care provided by trained and equipped personnel. 13 years ago, we led a collaborative and inclusive process to strengthen post-rape care through developing a national curriculum to train health professionals in post-rape care and revise the national clinical management guidelines. We handed this over to the National Department of Health. It is essential now that this work is revisited and that there is a continual stream of funding given to the Departments of Health to provide adequate training across the health sector for the provision of post-rape care, both through the Tutela care centres and through the district hospitals and similar facilities that still provide a very large part of our post-rape care. And accordingly, we need to also revise the policy and clinical management guidelines. The South African Medical Research Council assisted in laying a foundation for the Charter, in leading research in the country in describing drivers of gender-based violence. We really are in South Africa extremely proud that our researchers have conducted more research on gender-based violence than their colleagues in any other country in the global south. This is something that we need to use in order to drive an evidence-informed process of policy and campaigning in order to end this scourge within the country. Our research on femicide has highlighted the fact that 3 to 4 women are killed every day by their partners. And today we remember the horrific murder and dismemberment in East London yesterday of a 23-year-old law student at Fort Hare University. She reminds us in Women's Month that this terrible scourge is very much with us, and we need to redouble our efforts in order to remove impunity from the men who perpetrate this and to ensure that no more women die at the hands of their partners in our country. We really welcome the recognition in the Charter of the need to address structural drivers of violence, including poverty and low attainment in education, and their contribution to trapping women in social contexts where violence is normative in daily life. Our work has highlighted the particular vulnerability of women living in informal settlements, and it's vital that these areas are targeted in the forefront of efforts to uplift women and prevent violence experienced by women and girls. It's also essential that Parliament does review the maintenance laws, as the failure to pay maintenance is a very widespread act of violence against both women and children, and the legislation needs to be adjusted to remove the current bias towards men and the abundant loopholes that are widely used to enable men who can pay maintenance to avoid their responsibilities. We welcome the recognition of the rights of children to be raised without abuse and neglect in the Charter, and the critical role of exposure to these evolving cycles of violence in the overall problem we have in this country. Eradicating all forms of violence from our society needs to be a top priority if we are to be effective in preventing women from being exposed to gender-based violence, and stopping all forms of violence against children is a foundational plank in this task. We welcome the focus on stopping alcohol abuse and strengthening mental health care in tackling problems of violence. We've shown in the last year that we can reduce alcohol consumption in the country, and it has immediate impact on violence and trauma exposure. The challenge going forward that the South African Medical Research Council embraces is to help the government identify which paths to reduce harmful alcohol use are compatible with our societal values outside the context of our pandemic. We welcome the need for special attention to the most at-risk groups in the Charter: disabled women and girls, the LGBTQI community, and sex workers. Our recent research has highlighted extremely high levels of physical violence and rape that is experienced by sex workers from their clients, from intimate partners, from men in the community, and most shockingly by the police. And it is essential that we eradicate these forms of violence. Most important of all, we welcome the need to actively build gender equality in the country that's identified and runs through the Women's Charter. Respect for women in all our diversity is foundational to building a society free from violence. We welcome the priority given to actions that are based on evidence of what has been shown to be effective in combating violence against women. And at the South African Medical Research Council, we've particularly worked to advance evidence of what works to prevent violence against women. And it's essential, if we are to get the best value for our rands invested, that we use this to guide our programme of violence prevention. This really is what women in our country deserve. We also welcome the commitment to advance women's access to healthcare. Advancing NHI to redress gross inequalities in access is foundational. Also affirming women's rights to control their bodies. We remember the Choice and Termination of Pregnancy Act, which was a flagship piece of legislation in the programme of the early years of our democracy. And it's essential that the services provided for in that act are truly accessible to women in the public sector of this country. It's also essential that women's rights to mental health care are developed and expanded across the country, as it is foundational to our ability to be able to redress the consequences of exposure to violence and trauma that are so much part of women's lives. At the South African Medical Research Council, we commit to playing our part in making this Women's Charter a living and breathing document by undertaking and funding research needed to guide, monitor, and evaluate progress towards its lofty goals. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hughes. Thank you very, very much for your input, and also for the fact that you have committed to cooperation together with Parliament and government to ensure that the Women's Charter become a living document in the hands of the people. We will continue, and we will call on Dr. Matome Kanaka. But before we get there, let us just express appreciation to the IFP caucus under the leadership of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi for their message of support, as well as Sanwit and Valine Manuel Watson and Dr. Mnisi Msibi. Thank you very much for your messages of support. Highly appreciated. We continue, Dr. Matome.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Honorable Sylvia Lucas, to the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the leadership of the NCOP, members, to the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, Chapter 9 institutions, developmental partners, and South Africans. Deputy Chairperson, unfortunately earlier the Deputy Speaker threw me under the bus by saying I'll address the question on why a man was chairing the session on the launch of the Women's Charter. Unfortunately, I myself am going to, as he was throwing me under the bus, I'm going to grab his foot and drag him under the bus together with me, as I myself, that the Honorable Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula as the Speaker of the National Assembly, would lead us in this session. But to reconcile with Honorable Lechisa, I know that in our men's parliament platforms, we view the office of the presiding officers and the principals from an institution lens as opposed to a gender. I think there's somebody who's unmuted, if I can just be assisted. But as the SANAC men's sector,
Can the host officials assist us with the feedback that we are getting?
It's Reverend Mary Lowe who's not muted.
Can we please address that feedback? Thank you, Deputy Speaker. You may continue, Dr. Matume.
Apologies for that. As the SANAC men's sector, we really want to deliver beyond a message of support on the Women's Charter for accelerated development, to deliver a message of gratitude and commitment. Gratitude to the women of South Africa and the pioneers of the Women's Charter in 1954 and the subsequent reviews in 1994 and 2019, which has inspired the men of South Africa in following suit to establish and advance the Men's Charter, which in its blueprint is inspired by the Women's Charter. As men of South Africa, we are exactly 67 years, 4 months and 3 days late in instituting our Men's Charter since the launch of the Women's Charter in 1954 on the 17th of April. But rather late than never, the Men's Charter was presented to the President of the Republic of South Africa at the launch of the Takwani Re'eme Men's Movement, the Constitution Hill, in August of 2015 for public consultation and endorsement, which continues to undergo robust public consultations to reflect the aspirations of the men and South Africans in their diversity. Now, we're grateful to the women of South Africa for inspiring and guiding us in drafting our Men's Charter. Now, as men of South Africa, we are acutely aware that not only have we engineered a patriarchal society that has delivered an entrenched women's inequality, stunting and underdevelopment, and many of us continue to stand in the way of the agenda to advance women's equality, growth and development. So we deliver a message of commitment. And Honorable Natasha, as you correctly indicated, the role of us men in undermining gender equality. So we are committed to walk, to run, and if need be, to march side by side with women in the delivery of the aspiration of accelerating development enshrined in the Women's Charter, in setting a new vision and agenda to advance women's equality, growth and development. We will be presenting the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development in our various platforms, particularly the Men's Parliament platforms, from the upcoming traditional men's parliaments to traditional communities, to the local, the district, the provincial and the national men's parliaments, to ensure that as men of South Africa, we are not only familiar with the content in the Women's Charter, as Prof. Hlengiwe indicated, that it cannot be just be a piece of paper, but we need to ensure that we leave no one behind. So we'll ensure that we fully engage and advance the various articles in the Women's Charter on equality, on justice, on the economy, on family life, and partnerships, on violence against women, and health, and all the other articles in the Women's Charter to advance women's equality, growth, and development. I thank you. Malibongwe.
Malibongwe. Thank you very much, Dr. Matume. And thank you for actually realizing that what we are having is very progressive and very good, that you as men need to have the same set of document of demand, now becoming an instrument for accelerated development. And we are with you in making sure that the Men's Charter is as efficient and effective, or the process are as effective as the process that was followed with the Women's Charter. With that, I want to express appreciation to all of those that have participated in the second session of this program where I've been chairing. I will now hand over to the chairperson of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, Honorable Kate Bilankulu, to chair on the session with civil society and women's formation. Thank you. Over to you, Honorable Bilankulu. Thank you. Honorable Bilankulu, are you on the platform?
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. We now proceeding with our program under civil society and women's formation. I'm now going to call upon Ms. M. Libone from Gauteng. Over to you, ma'am.
Afternoon, honorable members.
You may proceed, madam. Ms. Libone, can you please proceed?
Possibly a network problem.
Or I must proceed and take the second speaker, then I'll come back to you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let me call upon Ms. B. Fanta from the Eastern Cape. Ms. B. Fanta from the Eastern Cape, are you there?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. It's Nkupani from the Eastern Cape, representing the Progressive Women's Movement in the Eastern Cape. Good afternoon to you, madam. Let me take this opportunity to greet the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, the Chief Whip of the National Assembly, and all the leadership that is present here, Deputy Minister, Professor Mkhize, all members of the Multi-Party Women's Caucus, and the stakeholder participants, Chapter 9 institutions, all protocol observed. My name is Ntombo Vuyo Nkupani, the chair of chairs in the Eastern Cape, and also the Progressive Women's Movement leader, together with Honorable Fanta. Comrade Fanta, the Premier and the Speaker have instructed me to bring you the warm revolutionary greetings from the province, and a special greetings to all the women, regardless of their color, race, and regardless of the participants' gender here in the launch. Then we greet you in the name of equality, development, and peace in a facilitated manner. Malibongwe igama lamakhosikazi. Chair, as we measure the progress of the road that we have traveled since 1954 up to 1994, and from 1994 to where we are today in the year of Mama Maxeke 2021, that is also a year that we are preparing for the local government elections. There can be no specific method than aggregating total liberation of women and their participation as a measure that captures the interconnection between race, class, and gender. Former President, the late Udata Samora Machel, once summarized it nicely by saying, the liberation of women, I quote, the liberation of women is not an act of charity. It is not the result of humanitarian or compassionate position. It is a fundamental necessity for the revolution, a guarantee of its continuity and condition for its success, close quote. When we looked at the challenges that are facing women in the Eastern Cape, one speaker has mentioned the atrocities that we are faced with, the issues of gender-based violence and femicide, the brutal killings of women, especially the young women, targeting the students, targeting the babies, kids, and all the vulnerable persons like the elderly women. As the Eastern Cape, we said, no, let us look at the program towards the launch of the charter. We identify the partners. When we identify these partners, we read about the history of Umama Charlotte Maxeke. Yena who said, how wena utswelela ibatla unyoluwe utsamaye le motho e mong o ska tsamaya o le mong. So the partners that we have identified in the fight against the scourge is the Council of Churches, Imbumba yamakhosikazi akomkhulu iya, the men's sector, amadoda oqobo, Men for Change, the gender conveners, the political parties represented in the legislature, Masimanyane Women's Support Center, gender activists, municipality women's caucuses, South African NGO coalitions, Women Against Women Abuse, Department of Social Development, South African Police Services, and other stakeholders that we have in the province. We said in the first place, we need to embark and strengthen the fight against hunger, because most of these atrocities are as a result of women and children, especially the girl children that are dependent on certain men that are monsters in their lives. Fight against hunger, ensuring the access to health facilities, housing, and also clean drinking water. We are saying we need to unite as the women of 1956 did. We unite and send a clear message. We need to advocate for the empowerment of the boy child, to curb atrocities perpetrated by them. We need to continue to review the laws disfavoring women, e.g. the granting of parole and submit to relevant bodies. There are some of those laws that have been reviewed, the 3 of them that we have participated in, but we are saying the review should continue until the women are emancipated fully. We need to look and ensure that there's effective participation and positive influence to bills affecting women and children. We need to hold accountable all the women that are put in positions of leadership, starting from the political side, that is parliaments, legislatures, municipalities, coming also to the government departments and all other stakeholders where women are put in positions of power. They need to push the gender agenda in all their plans and reports. We need also to interrogate budget and ensure that we have a gender responsive budget to the demands that clearly define the objectives and indicators of gender struggles. We need to work closely with special programs, unis, and other gender-focused structures for a common goal. We need to join programs with those with designated budgets and share resources. We need to consider empowerment programs for young girls and boys before they reach the age to start adult activities. Hence, in the Eastern Cape on the 25th of August this month, we shall be hosting the Young Women's Parliament, in which we would like the young women in the province to sit in those benches, experience being a member of the provincial legislature, discuss the issues that are affecting young women, and come up with recommendations so that our programs are directed to exactly what the young women would like to see their lives going forward. We need to equip women with necessary skills and capacity and prioritize the activities that are given from now onwards. So, Chairperson, as the Eastern Cape, we support the launch of the Charter and hope that it will give us and bring change in our lives. And we mean change in our lives, but not having the documents on paper, but also having the practical programs on the ground that will ensure that women and children are emancipated. Thank you, Comrade Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Sisi Ntombovuyo Kupane. Some women must push the gender agenda in all their deployment. Thank you very much. I'm now going to call upon Ms. M. Libone from Gauteng. Ms. Libone? Oh, maybe she disconnected again. Let me call a speaker from the Western Cape, who is Ms. Lumka. There are changes on the program. I got an information that Ms. Lumka will be the one representing the Western Cape. Over to you. Ms. Lumka from the Western Cape, are you there? If she's not there, let me move to Mpumalanga. Ms. Flora. There are also changes from the Mpumalanga. Instead of L. Murwane, there's Miss Flora.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Thank you, Ma Bilankulu. This is Flora Mabua Boltman. Yes, I'm from Mpumalanga representing Mamuruane because she's busy on the other activities that were earlier booked for her. But let me greet the leadership on this platform here and acknowledge the presence of the leadership on the platform, all protocols observed. As said, my name is Flora Mabua Boltman from Mpumalanga, representing PWMSA. Let me first start by congratulating Mayor Sylvia Lucas with her team, of course, for successfully drafting the 2021 Women's Charter, because facilitator, the year 2021 is also the 25th year of the Beijing Platform for Action on Gender Equality. Like the Women's Charter, it provides a guide for the fight for gender equality and calls upon governments, the international community and civil society, including non-governmental organizations and the private sector, to take strategic action to advance the goals of equality, development, and peace for all women everywhere in the interest of humanity. We have come a long way as women in South Africa and in the world since then in the fight for women representation and political. We need to put in all women politicians and administrators in leadership across the board and take them with us in this struggle of gender equality. A lot of work is still needed to be done, program director or facilitator, to address issues that we are faced with, issues of inequality and the like. We are still engulfed by poverty that bears a woman's face, dealing with unpaid domestic care work, closing the labor force participation gender gap. We must address violence against women. I read on the chat here, on the chat box, about a woman who was killed and put in the suitcase, Now, we still have to fight for violence against women. Not only women, we all know what violence is engulfing also our children. We have a lot of work. We need to deal with those women who are doing the unpaid domestic care work, closing the labor force participation gender gap, as I indicated, addressing that violence. We need to assist women to access finance for their businesses. We need to fight for access to justice. Youth and young women are not, I don't know, maybe young women, in terms of education, we need to come up with something that will make sure that they get educated. Issues of training, we still have to fight with that. Now, to fight for that. Now, what is the role of women in these challenges? The role of women in these challenges is that we need to start now. What is currently on the platform is that we are faced with the upcoming local government, and we need to, as women, start there because it is here by our feet. So we need to start there and take all women on board and make sure that we support them as they have access to the leadership in local government. And we need to look at how do we advance gender equality and empowering them as women as they ascend to that ladder. Local government is at the core of addressing these challenges, and they find expression in the local space. as a united voice, Chairperson, women in this space have an opportunity to coordinate and influence the desired change. We need to use that opportunity to assist women as they climb steps or going up. We need to influence the legislation and its implementation. It is also in the interest, Chairperson, of the provincial and national spheres of government to focus capacity building efforts in the local sphere, because according to us in Mpumalanga as PWMSA, we are thinking of that and using integrated development plan, IDPs, as tools as a driver that transformation. We can address the challenges impacting women in society. We can also address that in empowering them in leadership, and say, because our gains were a bit reversed, we need to up the game and try to make sure that 50% from now onwards, as honoring the Women's Charter, I realize in these coming elections. Chairperson, as I close, I want to support the call by the chairperson or by the drafters of the Women's Charter that we need to campaign for the Women's Charter. And yes, we are going to aggressively do that. The approach, aggressive, we are not going to win. So we need to aggressively approach that and support. As PWMSA, we support and we are going to be found on the ground doing the work. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Flora. We are going to support aggressively, so.
50% aggressively.
Aggressively. You were loud and clear. We heard you. Gauteng, are you there? Miss Livone?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Can you take us through?
Thank you very much, ma'am. And greetings once more, and all protocol observed. My apologies for exiting unceremoniously, so I was compromised by network this side. As I was alluding before, to say that we have experienced the death or the brutal killing of two of the warders at the correctional services, both in Gauteng and in the Eastern Cape in the past 2 weeks. And this come to show that the rise of GBV has become or is worsening on daily basis. Hence, it is very important for us to consider the ratification of Convention 190 so that we have or we promote safe workplace for both the males and the females. As women that have come together in coalition of organizations and engaged in a campaign that has enabled women to draw on their experience and define what changes are needed within the political, legal, economic, and social system. For decades, patriarchy, colonialism, and racism, even apartheid, have subordinated and oppressed women within political, economic, and social life. As PWMSA Gauteng chapter, we wish the launch a great success, and we want shared responsibility and decision-making in the home and the effective quality in politics, the law, and in the economy. For too long, women have been marginalized, ignored, exploited, and are the poorest and the most disadvantaged of South Africa. Hence, we applaud the session of today, and we say, Aluta continua, may the struggle of women continue, may we end gender-based violence today. And thank you very much, Mme.
Thank you very much, Ms. Libone. The struggle continues. We are proceeding with our program. Western Cape, Ms. Lumka, are you there? If not, I'll move to the Northern Cape. Ms. Miriam Paliso.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me greet the leadership chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, the Honorable Chief Whip of the NCOP, all protocol observed, leadership. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Miriam Palito. On the occasion of the launch of the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development, we, the Northern Cape Progressive Women's Movement, takes the opportunity of this special occasion, the launch of the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development, to congratulate Parliament and all role players in organizing this important event and in the development of the 25-year vision and agenda. The launch of the Charter is a reminder that gender equality is the foundation of economic and social progress. Gender equality is central to eradicating poverty, enhancing prosperity, and breaking silence of deprivation. Gender equality is essential to empowering both women and men with the opportunity of success and the prospect of happiness. Addressing South Africa's gender gap is one of the preconditions for undoing the vestiges of colonialism, apartheid, and patriarchy. Gender equality is the one big equalizer that can unlock tremendous talents, energies, and skills to advance the inclusive and sustainable society for generations to come. In the year of the legacy of Umama Charlotte Maxeke, Malibongwe, the Northern Cape Progressive Women's Movement takes the opportunity of this special occasion to launch of the Women's Charter for Accelerated Development to recommit ourselves and redouble our efforts towards the task of building an equal, inclusive, and prosperous society for all. As we were taught all this every Thursday by our president of the ANC Women's League, Umama Bathabile Dlamini, accelerated development must lie at the heart of all state and civil society activism and should find daily practical expression in the program of these institutional and organizations. We are the view that the struggle to overcome the triple challenges of inequality, poverty, and unemployment cannot be divorced from the requirement for systematic changes to advance and realize gender equality in South Africa. The achievement of this task is crucial to the creation of a peaceful and prosperous South Africa by empowering our poorest of the poor women in our rural environment. The Northern Cape Progressive Women's Movement commends the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, all the stakeholders, and the multitude of women throughout South Africa who contributed to the development of the Charter. We look forward to working with you towards the realization of the 25-year vision and agenda to advance women's equality, growth, and development. We submit and we support, as the Northern Cape Progressive Women's Movement South Africa. I thank you, Program Director.
Malibongwe, Mama Paliso, Malibongwe.
Malibongwe.
Malibongwe, Namakhosikazi, Northern Cape, Malibongwe.
Malibongwe.
Chair.
Thank you.
Chair.
Yes,
it's Honorable Hlangweni. I just want to check, is this Malibongwe only reserved for the ANC comrades that are
Why are
speaking?
you not saying
Let's
Malibongwe?
let's celebrate other women as well.
Let's celebrate
We must
women,
celebrate other
Malibongwe.
women as well. It mustn't be only reserved for ANC comrades.
But
Let's learn to celebrate other women as well.
Malibongwe,
It's a for women, liberation of
Thank you very much.
Malibongwe, member Tlangwini, Malibongwe.
Yes, Malibongwe.
Thank you all.
Women of the Northern Cape. And Malibongwe to Honorable Tlangwini. We are proceeding. I'm now going to call upon the KZN, Miss W2C. Is it? Yes. 2C from KZN.
Oh, Malibongwe, mamas, nkwazo.
Honorable Ngwenya, you can laugh. Honorable 2C from KZN.
Good afternoon.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm not Honorable Tusi. I'm actually standing in for Honorable Tusi. My name is Barbara. The surname is Thompson. And thank you very much. Malibongwe to the Western Cape as well. Thank you very much. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, you may continue, Ma.
Thank you, Ma. To the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, and to you, Honorable Bilankulu, the Chairperson of, is it the Women's Caucus? Or?
Yes.
As KZN, we wish to add our great support to all stakeholders on the launch of the Women's Charter. We also want to thank the leaders of Parliament for such sterling work in the whole process leading to this day. And the honor goes to Honorable Lucas and her team. Of course, the main concern always arises from the painful inequality that has always existed within all spheres of the lives of women. Women now demand proper equality at all levels of our lives, from the level of household, workplace, as well as all state institutions. I think most of the necessary legislative tools are now in place to implement our demands. What is now expected of us is to put what appears on paper into practice. And we need to move on with speed with this. And I'm sure budgetary constraints should not hinder us to implement our charter. And what specifically comes to mind is the issue of the very basic development resources, which are key to a simple, ordinary livelihood. I'm not talking about any fancy things here. I'm just talking about ordinary, simple issues, basic issues like your water, your energy. And I have a great passion. We have in KZN called the amount of land that we have. So we hope that issues is very critical, especially at this trying times of extreme poverty, sicknesses. The virus is also upon us, the hunger, and of course, all diseases that are with us as women. I'm sure also issues of soil erosion will be addressed in our venture to this new charter of ours that we have just revived. Issues of the degradation of land, deforestation, and many more. Because most of our people, especially in KZN, they demand they land, they strive on the forest and so forth. And we are saying, women of KZN, that women should actually benefit from our biodiversity that surrounds us. And we should also remember that South Africa as a country, we are so much blessed with this biodiversity. But we always note that this is still a glaring challenge for our women. These are available resources around us that don't need much, in order to use them. Lastly, as the women of KZN, we also want to pledge and fully commit ourselves to the reviewed Women's Charter. We actually offer our full support in this regard. And thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Ma.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes. Thank you very much for your support. Ma Thompson, I can hear you. Thank you very much for your full support and the indication that whatever appears in papers should be put in practice. We are now proceeding from the KZN. I'm going to the Free State. Miss Malev Livesi from the Free State.
Hello, I hope you.
Mama.
Malibongwe, Freestata.
Malibongwe.
Malibongwe, KZN. Malibongwe,
Freestata.
Malibongwe.
Malibongwe, Free State. Malibongwe, Malibongwe.
Malibongwe, Thokoza Gogo.
Malibongwe. Malibongwe. Thank you very much, Chairperson of the session. Let me indicate that my surname is actually Lepesa and not Libisi. In that note, I thank you.
My apologies. My apologies. Thank you. You may continue.
Greetings to the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Tsinodi, the Chairperson of the National Assembly, Honorable Masondo, the President of the ANC Women's League, Mayor Batabile Dlamini, and all protocol observed. Kindly allow me to switch off my audio, my video actually, because of the area that I'm in. As you can see, I'm in the mountains and it's very difficult for me to get network. So I will have to switch off my audio, if the House allows me.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair of the session. As we are gathered here today to witness the launching of the Women's Charter. Launching of the Charter happens in an era of COVID-19, which impacts a lot of families and also has increased a large number of child-headed families and unemployment.
It is therefore our responsibility to unite as a country and the province from all backgrounds, government, parastatals, civil society, and ordinary members of the community to ensure that there's a maximum effort in eradicating hunger and gender imbalances. We are gathered here today, and the launching of the Charter takes place exactly 11 days after the celebration of the Women's Day, which took place on the 9th of this month. We should remember that this year's Women's Month celebration is celebrated under the theme Generation Equality, Realizing Women's Rights for an Equal Future. And the concept of generation equality is a global campaign and links South Africa to global efforts to achieve gender equality by 2030. This gathering does not only take place after the Women's Day, but also coincidentally happens to take place on the 20th of August, which happens to be my birthday, and a few days after the birthday celebration of Me Gertrude Shope. In this year of Me Charlotte Maxeke, representing the Free State and being delegated by the Premier of the Free State, Honorable Me Sifuran Ntombela. As we are gathered here, we have women from different backgrounds. I'm sorry about that. And this proves exactly that the objectives of the progressive women's movement of South Africa, which are striving to unite women of South Africa, strengthening the relationship between the government and women's organizations, ensuring that women who are committed to the women's agenda have a forum to fight against the discrimination of women in all spheres of life have been realized. I'm very happy to announce that the Office of the Premier, Ntombela, today, as you look at the charter, on priority actions number 2, it says that advancing gender and equality through effectively mainstreaming development and government planning instruments, access across the 3 spheres of government. Government departments must tangibly reflect gender targets and agendas before approval by Parliament and the legislative sector broadly. Such planning shall reflect gender equity as well as equality within all government departments, internal equity numbers, which must also tangibly translate into equality in delivery and impact on women's lives in communities, external community-focused, tangible and impact-driven plans. The responsibility for gender mainstreaming for the advancement of equality shall be placed firmly with accounting officers across the 3 spheres of government. Furthermore, gender mainstreaming shall become an integral part of the process to interrogate all strategic plans. Government officials in line departments shall further also account for how their policies, programs, and their related budgets advance the gender equality. Now, in conclusion, in absentia, I would like to commend the Premier of the Free State, Me Sifuran Ntombela, for not only supporting the charter, the Women's Charter in theory. However, by ensuring that she's always a step ahead in practicalizing the Charter. The Office of the Premier is ensuring that the principle of the equality is tangibly finding expression in the strategic and annual performance plans. As I am addressing you today, I've been duly appointed by the Premier's Office as a gender coordinator responsible for Fesile Dabi district. And we hope that by appointing the district coordinators which will deal with gender, this will assist government in ensuring that there are proper ways in mainstreaming gender, and also monitoring and evaluation happens in local government, also in district council, and also to ensure that lobby and advocacy of women's issues happens on a daily basis. I thank you, Chairperson.
Malibongwe. And happy birthday, Miss Malefu. Wish you many more years of good health, and congratulations to your new appointment. We're now proceeding. Let me check if the Western Cape is ready now.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. I think we are ready.
Okay.
I'm this time.
Okay, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity. Let me do the formalities and greetings to His Excellency the President Cyril Ramaphosa, Deputy President Didi Mabuza, the Speaker of Parliament, Chairperson of NCOP, Ministers and Deputy Ministers, Members of Parliament, the provincial representatives, and all protocols observed. My name is Lumka Tambur. I'm a PWMSA Western Cape co-convener, standing up for my convener, which is Belinda Landingwe. We, as the PMWSA women in the Western Cape province, are honored to be part of this historical of the launch of the Women Charter for the accelerated development. We appreciate being afforded the opportunity to offer a message of support to this special engagement. Our message, Chairperson, derives from the article.
Why there's no sound now?
From the Article 3 of the Charter.
Mama, can you switch off your mic, please? Mama Barbara, please.
Okay, she's switching off. Our message, Comrade Chair, derives from the Article 3 of the Charter dealing with economy. In South Africa, women constitute a highest number of people, yet their participation in the economy has been overshadowed. Our country is one that has most progressive laws and policies intended to advance women's rights and promote equality in all spheres, but over the years, we have witnessed women being excluded in one of the most fundamentals of life, which is economy. Economic advancement has been scarce on the side of women. Since the dawn of democracy, women continue to disproportionately represent a large number of poor and unemployed. They are the face of poverty, which emanates from the social burden of being excluded in the economy. Most women are extremely exploited in the workplaces. Those who work equivalent to their male counterparts tend to earn less incentives than they are in their services. There's a high salary wage gap between men and women, but those women who have had an opportunity to taste economic freedom are marginalized from all forms of economy, which creates a setback to the struggles of success. However, as the PMWSA, we acknowledge and celebrate which women has made thus far through all the challenges that deprive them of equal share and equal opportunities in the economy. They continue to fight against relentless and exclusion from economical mainstream. One of the PMSSA mandates and minimum platform of action is to promote economic growth, particularly for women. We strongly believe that women should participate in the economy. Inclusion of women in the economy will ensure economic and social governance programs and responsive to the needs of women, and will afford them with sustainable income generation and will create economic independence. As PMSSA in the Western Cape, we trust that today's launch of the Women's Charter will enhance women's visibility in the economy and should ensure to support and development of women-owned management enterprise. By those words, Comrade Chair, we really support and appreciate for being part of this launch of this charter. And we say, Malibongwe Kamala Makhosikazi. I thank you, Chair.
Alibongwe.
Thank you very much, Malibongwe. Thank you very much, Ms. Lumka. It's true, we are not going to rest until we find the inclusion of women even into our economy. Thank you very much. I'm now going to my province to call upon Ms. Maria Mementi from Limpopo. Over to you, Ma. Mama Maria from Limpopo, are you there? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Before you start, can everyone please mute your gadget in order to allow the speaker to speak? Can we give the speaker a chance and mute our gadget, please? More especially those that are having kids next to them. Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Okay. Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Speaker of National Assembly, Chairperson of National Assembly, Deputy Chairperson of National Assembly, the President of the ASU Women's League, Comrade Watabile Jamini, our National Convener of Progressive Women's Movement, Honorable Professor Mkhize, all protocol observed. Greetings in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
I am Apostle Maria Mamezi, convener of Vembe District Progressive Women's Movement. I am here to represent the provincial convener of the Limpopo Progressive Women's Movement, Mme Maria Manamela, and the team. I feel very honored to be part of this historic event. As Limpopo Progressive Women's Movement, we appreciate the good work rendered by the following.
Mama Maria, May Apostle, can we see your face for a while, please? Can we zoom on your face, please?
Okay. I'm visible enough. Hello?
I can't see you.
You can't see me?
IT, can you assist? We want to see the apostle addressing us.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much. We must know our leaders.
Okay.
Yeah, so that when you are praying for us, we'll be able to know this person is the one praying for us. Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Okay. I was saying I am feeling very honored to be part of this historic event. As Limpopo Progressive Women's Movement, we appreciate the good work rendered by the following. The Office of the President, Mr. Ramaphosa Matamela Cyril, and his cabinet, especially the Minister responsible for women and children, the Progressive Women's Movement of South Africa, National Assembly and its structures, and all arms of the state. Since 2006, when we have launched Progressive Women's Movement at Mangaung, program of women are moving very well. Progressive Women's Movement is uniting women here in South Africa and outside South Africa. Again, is fighting for women all the time. South African, it was not easy. Today we are very happy. We are no longer singing 50%. Today, our women are represented in all our government or all institutions. Again, they are also representing us in many strategic positions. As Limpopo Progressive Women's Movement, we are accepting the launch of Women's Charter and all its recommendations. As Limpopo Progressive Women's Movement, we will support programs of Women's Charter. We will support you 100%. You know why we are supporting this Freedom Charter? Since the launch of this Freedom Charter in 1954, we are happy today. We have seen many things like Family Court, who were struggling, Equality Court, Maintenance Act, and many more. The list is endless. But we don't have many things that we can say because I'm not a keynote address. I'm not a guest speaker. I'm here to present the message of support. As Limpopo, we are ready to take any program that you said we must do, we will run with it. We will support you 100%. Thank you very much. Stay blessed.
Amen. Rolibuwa Mianga. Rolibuwa support Elani
100%.
100%. Thank you very much. I'm now going to call upon the last speaker, who is from the Northwest Province, Miss Pizza Likopani. Miss Likopani, over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair of the session, the Deputy Speaker, the Chairperson of the NCOP, all protocol observed. Let me thank you for allowing me to participate in the launch of the Women's Charter to represent the PWMSA Northwest. Our democratic breakthrough in 1994 represented the start of our journey to an inclusive society that cares for all. Since 1994, successive democratic administrations have committed to a progressive legislative framework and a human rights agenda that is strongly informed by the principle of gender equality. Women's emancipation and empowerment. The Women's Charter has transitioned from being an interesting and yet at times contested ideal to a concept that enjoys the widespread endorsement by international institutions, government, business, civil society, and tribal authorities. Honorable Chair, a focus on women's empowerment through realization of civil, political, economic, and social rights was justified within the context of high level of inequalities inequalities impacting on women, which was inherited by the new democratic government. The nearly universal adoption of the Charter as a guiding principle is due to its flexibility. It has allowed various stakeholders to adopt the articles of the Charter relevant to their own purpose. This is a strength. Through it, we have made progress. However, it is also a liability because various interpretation has led to confusion and compromised implementation. Despite the government commitment to gender equality, the Northwest Province is still faced with an unacceptable level of gender inequality. According to the statistics, South Africa, Northwest has more women than men. And according to the sex parity ratio in income earning statistics 2018, women in the province has outnumbered men at the ratio of 1.4:1 in the lowest earning bracket, but men has outnumbered women in the higher paying bracket. With female-headed household showing high level of poverty, which translates to children from those households having high level of multidimensional poverty rates, and 46.2% of female households in the province does not have an employed member yet, and 27.8% of male-headed households does not have employed member. Although the Gini coefficient has remained constant since 2009, 0.65 males still do better than women. Honorable Chair, furthermore, the Victims of Crime Survey of 2017-18 shows that the province women aging from 16 years still suffer assault crime, and the province is at the highest position nationally. Based on the 2018 sex parity ratio in income earnings community survey and victims of crime survey, it can be established that the equity is more on number, and equality in terms of equal opportunities is not taken into account. The absence of gender responsive budget is another major challenge that needs to be looked at. The absence of monitoring tools for women emancipation policy is key. The lack of gender mainstreaming knowledge on gender issues and women empowerment approach on both the department's municipal strategic documents is still a challenge. The rise in gender-based violence, despite policies and mechanisms are in place. Honorable Chair, basically the above indicates, regardless of all the efforts, women are still poor, women still suffer violence, women have lower levels of literacy and have the responsibility to feed their children. And thus the challenges for women are much bigger. It is then recommended from the side of the Northwest PWMSA that the mechanism to assess the effectiveness of the developed gender-based policies must be developed, that the gender-responsive budget must be made available. The sex offenders register should be open to public. The bail and parole for sex offenders must be reviewed. The systems to improve participation of women in rural and areas or villages by looking at them as specific community whose voice must be heard in all issues around women, as they are viewed as the most vulnerable group, must be developed. Honorable Chair, the Northwest PWMSA support the launch of the Women's Charter. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Malibongwe to the Northwest. Thank you very much, Ma Peter Likopani. We are now going to get the closing remarks and the way forward from the Deputy Speaker of our National Assembly. But before I hand over to him, I would like to take this opportunity and thank him, the Deputy Speaker, as the chairperson or as the first person to chair our session, and the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP for affording me this opportunity of sharing this special program with them. May the Lord Almighty enlarge your territory and take care of yourselves, going in and out and leading this nation. Thank you very much, everybody. Over to you, the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Zinoni.
Alibongwe, Chairperson, Alibongwe.
Malibongwe.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bilangulu. Thank you very much. Malibongwe, Kamledu. It's a privilege to have arrived at this stage of our gathering today. And I wish to start by expressing great appreciation to all the participants today, especially because of the work you did before you came here. Firstly, many of you who participated in the various processes of consultation throughout the provinces and the districts and in your organizations and structures. So that today we've arrived at having received the what can only be really a fragment, if I may put it so, the summary of the key issues that has arisen for us to say, why haven't we been successful to date on these matters? So those contributions are absolutely valuable. And we take it that the next process, and I also take from some of the comments that have been made here, constitute empowerment. And someone spoke of the necessity for us to provide information, knowledge, and understanding to accelerate implementation. Amongst both women and men, some of the dynamics we have spoken about here have not been fully grasped. So it remains our responsibility, without being paternalistic, to communicate and share the findings of this process everywhere in the country, in every ward in the country, that people there, organizations and leadership, including people, should be able to understand, including in their languages, what the Charter is all about and what it is saying. So that the possibility for accelerating implementation is made for real by better understanding. The United Nations representative spoke about building better, faster. I would like to add urgently, so that unlike what happened in the past, what should happen from now onwards should happen. Of course, some of the issues will have to happen at a greater speed than others. There are people who will still require speaking to and hearing out and thinking through and benefiting from their insights about dealing with implementation. And for me, this is what we appeal to you in the forward, that we would like to draw from your creativity and ways of communicating what we have discussed here in the most accessible manner, in the most creative and persuasive manner, so that people who have a responsibility for implementation, whether to increase funding, to target it appropriately, to disaggregate data and information, which must inform what must be done according to the presentations we have received, is absolutely critical. But most importantly, this work is obviously aimed at dealing with what others refer to as the social reproduction crisis. The crisis of people, individuals and families, of not being able to make a decent living, to have a decent work and a decent wage. So those conditions in themselves should be what drives us to reach out to as many people as possible, including those who we would have loved to have been part of the process, but couldn't get them in for whatever reason that may be. So we really appreciate and are grateful to your contributions today and so on. I also wish to say and explicitly say that because we now live in a village, it's becoming more village every day. We have been experiencing it for years, that we are part of a neighborhood here, the SADC region, for example, which adopted the SADC master plan, which developed the gender responsive, sensitive budgeting guidance, from which part of the work we are doing is also inspired by. So that SADC, our reporting back to SADC that this is what we've done as part of advancing what we collectively agreed on, is a critical part of that message that we are carrying today as we end this program today. But similarly, the AU and its 2063 agenda is informed also in key aspects by this work that we are doing. We can provide information, and through our Minister of International Relations and the presidency, report the steps we are taking to achieve the goals of the AU at 2063 agenda. Similarly, the Sustainable Development Goals, that goal number 5, and other related goals are critical part of the work we are doing. We are suggesting that what we are going to have to do, the way forward, includes accounting as responsible participants to those regional, continental, and global structures of the advances we are making. We are also members of parliamentary associations, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians, the IPU, the Parliamentary Union, the International Parliamentary Union, so that in the work that has been done already, our accountability also serves as inspiration to others, that the South African Parliament is true to its weight to pursue complete transformation and the equality as, of course, guided by our own constitution. As men and women, we have a task to intensify our work together and separately, but always working together to advance this common objective. That's going to be a very important. We would like, as individuals and individual organizations and institutions, to really ensure that we do that. We increase the collaboration and cooperation to advance these things. We do not underestimate the difficulties we're going to have. My final remark is that yesterday we elected the Speaker of the National Assembly. She was not able to be here today because she's still catching her breath, and we will ensure that she comes in hops on an already moving train as soon as possible. So we undertake to brief her, and of course the chairperson will also do that because that's her colleague in the EXCO of Parliament. So the Speakers Forum itself will receive a report from this process, so that we report to the speakers and deputy speakers of the provinces. And we hope that similarly, the South African Local Government Association also receives a report and thinks through how we can implement this. They were part of this process and so on. And all the support institutions have really played a decisive, informative, and constructive information and insights that will help us hopefully run faster and urgently to implement the provisions of the new charter. The challenge is not going to be simple, but we really thank you deeply. Let's increase the multi-party collaboration, multiple multilingual communication and interface, including at all levels, so that we really fast-track implementation this time around. We have an opportunity to work unlike we have worked before, given the observations people have shared with us. So let's meet their requirements. Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. You have played a critical role. Our offices and their collaboration to play this supportive role, we thank them deeply. And so do we thank all the institutions that have been part of us throughout and so on. And we hope that that collaboration will continue now with implementation of what has arisen. We really appreciate it. I do realize that Barbara Thompson remains green in her heart, and we completely endorse the environmental challenges that are occasioned by climate change remain in our face and confront every family in our country. So the work we must do sensitive to those dynamics are critical ones. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. Can we see some visuals of the charter, please, before we totally go away here?
Yes, Chairperson, you're right. Let's see the insight of the publication, just to give an insight here.
Hey, Coco, and how are you?
Tandy, mute. That happens, yeah. Yeah. Chairperson, as the document is being shown around, I forgot to add that the charts will be harvested. We appreciate the effort you made to write in there so that we save as much time as possible as we benefit from your insight. So it's a good practice to put in an idea or two. They will be harvested and will be used to draw a program for following up some of your requests, but also proposals where it matters most. Thank you very much.
We really hope that we will be able to distribute the hard copies by next week when we have the Women's Parliament, because it's important that the women of South Africa get access to this very important document. Not all of us are online, so we will have to make sure that provinces also get copies to be able to distribute that, or they may print. Thank you very much. I don't know where's the chairperson now. The overall chairperson is you, in actual fact, Deputy Speaker. You were the overall chairperson.
No, Deputy Chair. I think you've said it full, and I do want to just to re-emphasize the necessity, as you say, to make sure that this document arrives in every ward of our country. I think there are roughly 4,000, if I'm not wrong. Every ward in our country, and no, they can't be 4,000. So that it also arrives there, or it's available in the different languages that are spoken in our country. It's a critical material that we can't conceal it inside English only. So this is an important part of that work. So thank you very much, you Chairperson and the Chairperson of the Multi-Party Caucus and your members from all political parties who contributed. We really appreciated your contributions and the constructive remarks, having read the charter, having participated, perhaps not optimally in every single district and or provincial interface because of the nature of the time and availability of the leadership from all of those areas. So we do appreciate those programs. But to the extent that you've made these contributions, we really appreciate it. Thank you very much. The meeting and the launch is now done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Malibongwe.
Thank you, leadership.
Viva Parliament, viva NCOP.
Viva Parliament. Viva
Matohonolo, you are right. We do what you are saying.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mayor. Yeah.
Thank you, Sihlengi. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, leadership.
Thank you very much. We must advise the people translation services, they've got their work cut out.